Recording program.
Here.
I'm sorry. Barry didn't want me to do that hard. I apologize.
Gullies.
If Andre's ready, welcome to the Marine Advisory Board, Thursday, February 6th. Interesting meeting. We had a great meeting last January 2nd, which was a joint MIASF MAB meeting. We had a lot of homework, etc., which we'll get to later in old new business. Let's start, please, with a roll call, if you would.
Barry Flanagan.
Here.
Bob Swindle.
Swindell, here.
Swindell, thank you.
Yep.
John Lynch.
Here.
Tyler Brunel.
Here.
Robert Franks.
Here.
Robert Washington.
Here.
Bill Walker.
Here.
We have, Vice Chair James Harrison.
Here.
Chair Steve Whitten.
Here.
And on the phone or via Zoom, we have Jason Dunbar.
Here. You guys hear me?
Is Miss LaRonda Ware here? You have a quorum.
Jason, welcome. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. Jason Dunbar is joining us on Zoom. He is unable to be counted. His vote's unable to be counted. But thank you again for taking it seriously and joining us. So let's jump into it, please. Minutes from last month, there was a lot to go through, etc. No doubt everybody has read them. We will not have a test this month, but does anybody have the issues, problems, suggestions, etc.? Not, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
Second, Mr. Franks. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That is approved. Brings us now as well to item number 4, which is an introduction to our new member who is not here. So LaRonda Ware has been appointed by PM Beasley Pittman. We welcome her, and if she shows up after, we will make sure that we acknowledge her. Maybe she got caught in traffic or whatever. But so welcome, Lord LaRonda. Waterway crime and boating safety reports. We changed it this month, and this has fattened up a good deal. In addition to Travis O'Neill, who will never give up that seat at the end of the table. We also now have a fire rescue marine team, and I'm going to go back to them in a second. We also have code compliance with us. So I'm going to acknowledge a few folks. We have Garrett Pingle, who is somewhere, who is from Fire Rescue, and he's Deputy Chief of the Fire Department. He's going to do the first presentation this month and introduce the gentleman who will be hopefully joining us on the board every month. So in addition to Travis, we're going to hear what's happening on the waterfront fire. We also, I'm thrilled to say, have, in addition to our new code enforcement officer, Edward Eason. Am I correct somewhere, guys?
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very much. We're going to have you get up. But we also have, they brought out the entire team. We also have Marco Aguilera, who was there, and Manny Garcia. So all the guys are here. We appreciate you joining us. So as we go forward, Ed, you're going to join us on a monthly basis. Is that how it's going to be? Is it Ed or Edward? Is that cool? Thank you very much. So let me take a moment. Let's go through the reports. We're going to ask, let's get Sergeant Travis O'Neill, and then we'll get a report from Ed, and then Deputy Chief Pingle will give us a little background on the fire department. Sergeant.
All right. During the month of January, the Fort Lauderdale Police Department Marine Unit responded to 86 calls for service. One of note was at 3001 West State Road 84. In the marina there was a boat burglary where 2 garbage GPSs were taken. We had video evidence, but there wasn't much to be found on the video. We did, however, pull 10 fingerprints off the vessel with Center for Processing. I haven't heard back to see whether they had a match for that or not. That was the only main event like that for the month. We had 4 vehicle or vessel crashes with no significant injuries. or property damage. And we wrote 31 citations.
Coming up, anything special we have coming up? Really nothing special for the
Not
next couple
till
weeks.
April.
Got April
Tortuga,
14th is
and then
coming,
the
and then
air
we
show.
have the air show. Great. A couple of our favorite events. So, Ed, if you'd be kind enough to give us an update, and we'll make sure we have room at the table for all you guys to want.
So I'll be presenting tonight
Uh-oh.
for the last time, but Ed is he's here to observe for tonight, so I'll take over. So
Why
in
don't you
total,
introduce yourself for the record?
oh, I'm sorry, Manny Garcia, City of Fort Lauderdale, Senior Code Compliance Officer. So since November till today, we've had a total of 63 waterway inspections performed on the water. One of the ones that kind of stands out the most, was the property 818 Southwest Fourth Place. That was actually a proactive, discovery while we were monitoring the waterways. We observed this, large yacht that was at the rear. They were doing major cosmetic work on the vessel. They were sanding and grinding, and all that was actually getting into the, intercoastal waterway. We immediately took action to cease the work. We issued them a notice to appear. They were fined $2,500 for their actions, and obviously, if it does happen again, it can go all the way up to $15,000. That's all I have for you guys today.
Thank you very much. So it's really important, obviously, the code's on the water, for a variety of reasons, but when Manny talks about working on boats, et cetera, when we look at the whiteboard action items from last month, a couple of them were obviously that you're not allowed to work on a boat, you're not allowed to sand the bottom of your boat, you're not allowed to take the barge, scrape the rust off into the water, et cetera. So these guys are on it. We all know how to reach them. If you don't, reach out to Andrew, who'll make sure you do, and we'll make sure we know how to contact the team going forward. Best of luck to you in your new capacity as well, both of you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that brings us to, hey, so what hours, are you working now on the water? Anybody?
So we're still gonna continue with the Monday and Thursday, performing our inspections during those days. Obviously, if something comes up, we'll send someone out. Ed here works Monday through Thursday from 6:30 in the morning until 5 p.m. But regardless, he loves his overtime. So, regardless of whatever it is, we are available both to you guys and to the entire city of Fort Lauderdale. So anything that we can do to assist or take care of any matters on the water, try our best to get out there as soon as possible.
This is outstanding. This is a group of guys, code compliance kind of is something that really showed their head in the last couple of years, et cetera. And Manny and Mark who have been there from the beginning. But they are a critical part of what we do on a daily basis. And to be so proactive and bring the team, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. I'm going to assume that is Laurent. Am I
Yes, sir.
correct? So we're excusing you being a few minutes late because you obviously don't realize how much traffic we have. But would you take a second, please, and just introduce yourself to the board? We've explained who you are and that you're in PMP's Lee Pittsburgh District, and we are thrilled to have you. Give us a little background.
First of all, let me apologize. My son has my car, so when you have children that wants to ride your ride. Well, I'm Laurent Ware. I've been a longtime resident of the city of Fort Lauderdale. I have served on this Marina board in the capacity for the Fort Lauderdale branch NAACP. I represent Roosevelt Walters at the time because he could not serve on many boards. I've been in the community as the HOA president for about 13 years for Dorsey River Bend. And I also just retired from the city for 33 years with the Parks Department. So I've been around a very long time.
So my guess is you probably knew Andrew before you.
Yes, a little bit. We've met here and there.
Thank you. I'm no longer the newest board member.
Thank you again and welcome to David. If you would, Chief Pingle, if you'd come up. So again, I've had the great pleasure of meeting Garrett, Chief Coleman, a number of the guys here. We have Chad from Station 49. We met. This is a phenomenal group of guys, and we're thrilled to have on board. But what they do is obviously as important as what Travis and his team do. And so in addition to asking the chief, if he would appoint someone to join us, he's also gonna give us, since the first time here, a little background on actually what goes on with the fire rescue. Thank you for
I
that.
appreciate it. And he'll pull up the slideshow here in a sec. I'll take a little bit of liberty. Garrett Beagle, Deputy Fire Chief, been with the city just over 25 years now. Pleasure to be here and host you guys every month. So today I have Captain Chad Roberts with me. He is one of our frontline officers at the Firehouse 49 in the south end of the wall. Seabreeze there, where we house our boats by Bahia. And we want to take an opportunity to give you a little bit of understanding of what we do. But first, I want to make it very clear that even though we're fire rescue and we're that forward-facing response, when you talk about law enforcement and environmental services, we're a part of that same team. Our hope is to grow the Marine team even beyond its current services and be a part of that support community. We were currently staffed and we have to be more of a reactive response. We use what's called adaptive response, where personnel that staff that vessel 24/7, 365 are also on land-based units. They have to go back and forth depending upon the emergency that comes out at the moment. It limits how much we can be a part of the whole team. Our vision, our long-term hope is that through support and staffing and the vessel becomes full-time staff, we'll be on the water all day long with law enforcement, with environmental services, and being that extra set of eyes. And it's funny, even though we're not out there writing citations, I can guarantee you, if we're taking our fireboat down to no wake zone, there's a line right behind us of people following the rules, because they know we have the instant access to let them know that the personnel in the private watercraft are not following what they're supposed to do. So we hope to keep moving forward and be a bigger part of the marine industry than we currently are. So the station has been staffed for many, many years. It started back in the 80s with a team called the Shark Team, where dive rescue and fireboat services really became one. Before that, it was just a fireboat team. The station is staffed with 3 units. It has 8 personnel at a minimum every single day there, and all personnel are trained in shipboard firefighting, basic structural firefighting, all paramedics, all dive rescue certified, and respond to a multitude of water emergencies on a regular basis. Can you bring that slideshow forward? The team's capabilities are unique for this county. We are the only fire boat team in the county that provides both fire and dive rescue services. For the majority of the rest of the county, dive rescue is conducted by law enforcement. So Broward Sheriff's Fire has a fireboat in the port. We team with them on a regular basis. They are surface only and fire services, but we are also underwater rescues. We work with FLP on a regular basis when it comes to water safety rescues. We respond in tandem with each other, and we generally take the initial rescue component, and then they will come in and support rescue, and then work on recovery when it comes to any type of dive concern. We are one of the more highly trained teams in the state, if not nationwide. We use specialized equipment, things like Rapid Diver, which is a free diving assistant that allows rescuers to get in the water within moments of arrival while divers prepare. So we keep growing the team, but like I said, our hope is to be more full-time staff, like law enforcement is, to be on the water every minute of the day, be more visible within the community. Go to the next slide for me. So to make it real simple, it's our first time coming back in a while, so I want to give you just the last quarter's update of some big incidents. We respond to approximately 30 to 40 calls per month, variety of calls on the waterway, from medical emergencies that may be ICW just offshore, cruise ships and cargo ships, as well as marine accidents and such. So some of the recent incidents we had this last quarter, for example, Sun Princess calls us out to evacuate medically needed people on the vessel because Coast Guard doesn't always have the capability or the desire at that moment to provide the service. December 5th, we had a flash fire, as you all know, off of 15th Street. 23rd as well, some capsized vessels, and January 12th at Pier 66, we had a larger yacht fire that we were able to get an aggressive stop on. Next slide. So just some images from what you see on October. 2 patients on board cruise ship for Sun Princess needed to be transferred to an onshore hospital for immediate medical care. This is something that our watercraft is specialized to do. We have the ability to execute this because of the size of the craft. The challenge that we face, obviously, is when we go to perform this exercise, land-based units go out of service. So if you live in the south end of the beach, we have engine, ladder and rescue 49 and quarters. Those units must go out of service to get on the boat to respond to the incident. And we as a system have to absorb that vacancy in the organization and move coverage and start to move the pieces around to provide coverage. That's why we have the aspiration to lower down the road and get full-time staff. Next one for me. I'm sure most people were at this one on December 5th. Shortly after fueling, we had a vapor explosion on a small vessel over 15th Street Fisheries. If you hit the space bar, there should play the video for you. So that was the first of the two we had in a recent couple of events over there. A couple people were injured. We actually ended up giving some awards to some dock hands that were working that day, as well as some just patrons that were there fueling their own vessel. And these on-water incidents do happen often. People get injured, people fall in the water. And we are more successful when the vessels are on the water actively patrolling. Many times our law enforcement partners beat us to some of these incidents because they're actively in the vessel and they're moving around the waterways all day long. Next slide, please. Another example, one of our everyday responses, offshore capsized. Somebody in a condo staying at a vessel, half mile, 3/4 mile offshore, overturned, unsure. We respond out. Many times with our law enforcement partners. What most people don't realize that our response is going to be the initial and the fastest response. Coast Guard has to receive orders, they have to launch a mission, and many a times we'll make contact with these vessels prior to Coast Guard in conjunction with law enforcement and CETO. One capability we have that will ever happen on this call is to ensure there is nobody trapped in the vessel. We have the ability to put divers in the water, which we did on this call. So divers quickly donned their gear, made an underwater attempt, and confirmed the vessel was clear. Nobody was trapped in any kind of survivable space. Next slide, please. The more well-known explosion we had recently on 15th Street Fisheries on December 23rd, shortly after fueling a vessel. We had a large vessel explosion. Ended up throwing multiple people onto the deck, onto the dock, and into the water as well. This fire was able to be seen for quite a distance throughout the city. If you don't know, it did make international news. I think it even aired in India. I received phone calls all over the country. I saw you on the news. They said it was in Australia. It wasn't in Australia, it was here. But if you hit the space bar, I'll play the other side of the left.
Two additional rescues, please.
Steve, we got a third one right here.
And so you can get one of our smaller vessel or craft left.
Engine 8 to rescue it. Help us with this hose line.
Keeping the vessel up against the dock by using it. The importance of showing you all this video is to understand that these incidents do occur on the water. It's our priority to be available to respond. It comes back, and I keep going back to adaptive response as even I've talked about it a lot. One of our
just keep it right there. Keep it on the fire right there.
Navigating
keep it on the fire right there.
In this situation, if the fire engine was on a vehicle accident with rescue truck and the ladder was on the 5th floor lifting somebody back into bed, the boats would not be available to respond. We have to ensure that that station is heavily staffed, so we at least have a higher probability of units in service to respond. But as the chief of operations, that's one of the things that kind of keeps me up at night is I know that I hope this vessel is available to respond. I do have great officers like Chad that work at the firehouse who listen to their radios, and if they can clear the calls they're on, if they can make it back. But all these things that happen in moments make a difference. So next slide for me. And finally, just to give you a synopsis of the last quarter, our January 12th, 77-foot vessel, super yacht, had a decent sized fire in the back area of the vessel. In this situation, we made an amazing stop on this fire. Captain, were you on this call?
Not on call.
You have a lot of information on it. Do you want to kind of share a little bit on how we were so successful on this call?
As Chief Mingo was saying, with our adaptive response, like today, we had a fire in the southwest section near 441. Our ladder truck was there assisting the crews with the fire. So if a call would have come in, we would not have had a fire boat available to respond. Approximately 2.5, 3 hours while we were at this call. On this call, they were actually out training that day. They were at the port doing some training, and they heard the call come through, I believe on channel 16, and they started making their way there. They got there before the smoke really started showing, and were able to get the engineer to open up the beach access area, and they were able to stop it pretty quickly. And I believe they thought the fire came from a refrigerator. But had they not been on the water when they got there, it would have been a major loss.
Yeah, and not to keep harping on that, but it was asked to really discuss that topic a little bit tonight to paint you a picture. The equivalent to be law enforcement being in their vehicles, responding to day-to-day calls, and then having to park over at Cooley's Landing and jump in a vessel and respond to a call. That's kind of been the modality that we're working. Thankfully, in this situation, our personnel were on the water. They did hear it come across the channel, responded instantaneously as the system should work, and limited vessel damage to probably under $500,000, where it could have been millions and millions, if not a total vessel loss with the conditions they encountered once they got the vessel open and made access inside. So, you all received a little bit of a handout, and just to kind of touch base on that for another about minute or two, and then I'll stop talking and answer any questions for you guys. But just some background information for you all and how we respond. And we address things in the fire service as low, medium, moderate, high risk incidents. You'll see on the bottom of page 1, there's some times and demographics in regards to what our turnout time is to arrival and calls. Some of the important information in this document is that we currently rely a little more on land-based units to assist with some of our waterway incidents right now because of the fact that the vessels are not on the water actively. So they're responding from the southeast portion of the city. So we do rely on land-based vessels to make contact a lot of times for our mid-city or north city calls. Try and either make verbal contact with the vessels, get a visual or live information, sometimes even commandeer a vessel and get out to the boat while our fire boat's responding from the south of the city. One thing I do want to share with you is that we have an aspiration to be able to provide this service countywide. Back in 2021, early 22, because the marine calls were rising to such a rate countywide, when we were still on automatic countywide dispatch, we had to make the decision to pull the reins back on that. So up until 2022, if there was a marine call anywhere in Broward County, which many of the vessels are coming out of the full water area to open water, we would automatically be dispatched countywide. That's the only ask. We had to take a modality of, we want the agency holding jurisdiction now to call us if they want assistance, which brought our call volume down tremendously, keeping the fire trucks and the ladder trucks and the rescues at the station available more often to respond to land-based emergencies, as well as marine emergencies within the city of Fort Lauderdale, which is our primary response here. We do want to get back to the modality we had before of responding countywide at a moment's notice with our partners in Port Everglades and all the shorelines across Broward County. When you look at our team's abilities compared to Palm Beach County, Dade County, and here, the members of my team are truly second to none with what they can, and we're just trying to work forward and getting them doing that all the time. So,
If I can interrupt you,
please.
we're talking a lot about firefighting and stuff like that. A lot of our calls, especially during the summer months, we get a lot of drownings that, don't make the media, and a lot of people don't hear about it. One recently we had with the police department, it was last year. We had a young lady rent a jet ski, got out on the jet ski, had a backpack on, took the backpack off, and she wanted to end her life. She kettlebelled, she got a kettlebell and kettlebelled it to her wrist and jumped off. Other people were renting the jet ski, and the guy at the jet ski rental saw her jump in, and without her life jacket, didn't see her surface. He started the 911 process. Fort Lauderdale Nautical Unit was on the water. One of our engines was on the water with one of our rapid divers was on that unit. I believe it was off of Oakland or Commercial. And he swam out from the beach, was able to locate where she was at, swam down 20 feet. He's a diver. Grabbed her, but wasn't expecting a 25-pound kettlebell to be attached to her. Because of the rapid response he got, when he came up, the police unit pulled up and passed it on to them. We were able to get pulses back before we got to the hospital. She did not, over 3 weeks, she was in ICU and she did not make it. But us getting there quick, we were able to, she was an organ donor. And her family, we had contact with her family, she was able to save 4 lives by saving hers. So we talk a lot about fire, but there's so much on the marine side because we are the only unit that goes below the water and does the dives. So that's something also I wanted to make you all aware of.
100%, and know that our partnership with law enforcement is tremendous, as well as Ocean Rescue, which falls under the purview of fire rescue. And we work with them on a regular basis because we understand that those that are on the water, ocean side as well as ICW side, they're all part of our community, all our family here. So we have a very strong partnership with Ocean Rescue. Our services align. If we have any offshore incident up to a mile out where a vessel is in distress, a medical call on a vessel, a heart attack, a pass out, a seizure, Ocean Rescue is notified automatically as well. They respond out on jet skis and meet our personnel out there, just like our fire rescue personnel, most of the Ocean Rescue lifeguards are EMTs or even paramedics. So we're providing this higher level of care. The ability to have their team on the water, not just providing fire service, but EMS services is a tremendous benefit. You know, imagine being on a vessel with your family cruising the ICW and having that medical emergency and not knowing what to do. With a quick call, you have land-based and water-based units coming to provide assistance. That's it in a nutshell. I'll get off the soapbox. It's been a long time since you've been here. And I know since the last time we were involved, our services have definitely changed. So if there's any questions, I'll gladly answer them for you. If not, I will pass it back to Steve.
First of all, welcome aboard. And I can't, and if anybody has questions, but I've experienced these guys firsthand. I can't say enough about everyone I've met there. And so one of our initiatives this year, obviously on our whiteboard, et cetera, is talking about putting a boat up at the Gracious, so upper of Bradford, put up a fire boat up there. The discussion is the older McKee craft would be there. We'd like to see the fire department get a third boat. And as the chief said, and Chad, the goal is to have them on the water full time to provide EMS services and to be able to be there for basically quick response. So that's one of the goals. These are guys that, again, it's the type of thing what I've found, it's out of sight, out of mind. When your house is on fire, your boat's on fire, you simply assume the fire department will show up. The fact that we haven't had a major issue because of timing and lack of resources is just a matter of time, guys. So our big charge is to make sure we support these guys. This is the boating capital of the world. The Venice, United States, and we have 1.5 fire boats. So thanks.
We encourage all of you, if you all are like,
Got it.
this fire station or get a hold of Chief Pingle, you all are welcome to come by anytime for a tour, come have lunch with us and let us know what you do day to day. And he got to stop by
It's a
and
history lesson.
see firsthand. I don't talk about it much, but the police officers on the green team, they come once a month. We let them put on our fire gear and shoot water and feel like real heroes. And to see the smiles on their face is great. I know I'm being
No, that'll get.
Chief, would you help us identify what programs Palm Beach County or Palm Beach Port and Miami, the port would have versus what we have?
So I don't want to speak too much on for the port, as the port has their own fire rescue services internally. We are more of a support mechanism for Port Everglades. Our focus in Fort Lauderdale Fire is to provide the ICW waterway safety, oceanside safety, and work in a supporter role for the Port Everglades team. But if you were to talk about Miami-Dade, for example, they have two separate initiatives. Obviously, they have a boat team that is prepared to respond to emergencies within their port by their berths and everything in their large vessels, as well as a separate team that will respond oceanside or up their river systems. And Palm Beach County is the same thing, but I think much more reserved. You'd be actually surprised to know that within Palm Beach County, there are very limited to no fireboat services available throughout the entire county. In Palm Beach County. Boga has a very small boat. Palm Beach County Fire does not have a vessel at all. City of West Palm does not have a vessel at all. So when they have large scale incidents on the water up in the Palm Beach area, they're more reliant on potentially us to even respond up, or Coast Guard response, or boats coming from the north to assist. And they rely on law enforcement vessels for the most part in the Palm Beach County. So, unfortunately, I do think that the from the fire and EMS side, when it comes to water safety, I think along the majority of the coast, it's probably not where it needs to be. there is a needed presence for law enforcement, and they have it, and they're out there, and they do get a lot done. I can't say enough about these guys and girls on the boats out there where you see body cam footage of them making a rescue of a person drowning in the water, and they're on the boat by themselves. It's tremendous what they do. And then we show up as the second responder, and they like to say, and give them a hand. But it is a team effort, and that's our hope and vision, is to continue to grow the team and be more active in the holistic water safety side that we currently are.
Is it a budgeting issue?
I would use the word budgeting. It's a funding issue, obviously. There's something, when you say budgeting, meaning we're not misbudgeting our money. We're definitely, but you can only provide the service you fund. We have, law enforcement, public safety, environmental service, any city service, in a way, it's an insurance policy. There's good, better, and great, right? We try and maximize that policy for our stakeholders within the city based upon the funding allocation we have. Obviously, with the low frequency but high risk of marine incidents, even being far less than how many house fires we respond to, and obviously cascades to medical calls are 75% of our business. We face that philosophical challenge of, am I going to put more personnel on the rescue trucks so that I can provide better EMS service and save a life through cardiac arrest, which we run 500 times to 1,000 times a year? Or are we going to allocate personnel to the vessel prior to achieving that strategic goal? The hope is we achieve all the goals in a sequence that makes sense for our stakeholders. So we are currently moving forward with additional staffing for all of our rescue trucks in the city. And as that staffing meets full capacity, hopefully in the next 6 months to a year, we will be able to more aggressively push toward trying to get additional funds to make that team at least partially for that full-time staff. I mean, even just having a couple personnel assigned to the vessel where the land-based trucks can augment would be a game changer for us. Like, you'll see a small notation there just to get the personnel in the water to train for the incidents, whether it's within our city or sitting in the port. Those land-based trucks have to go out of service. And that does impact the service we provide every single day to you all on the streets of the city. Promise every month won't be this much information. In the future, you'll have either Captain Robinson or hopefully the battalion chief over the team will come in every month and provide a brief report like we got from the sergeant, and maybe cover any large incident that occurred throughout that month or 2 month period. That'll be our future goal for you guys.
Thank you again. Really welcome aboard. So again, we'll do what we can. I had reached out to, per Andrew's recommendation, I had reached out to acting town council, Wayne, to ask if we could have the March 6th MAB meeting at Fire Station 49. We'd move the trucks out, we'd put chairs there, there's plenty of parking there. It would be eye-opening for not just us, but the public to see what actually goes on. I'm kind of there. I'm not sure if it's going to happen in March, but I'm telling you, if you're driving down the street, there's no more welcoming group. And if you have a kid, they're even more welcome than you are. These guys roll out the red carpet. And if you haven't walked around the building and seen the old photos there, it is really, it's an amazing group of guys that are actually like a family. So thrilled to have you join us.
And Steve, if that doesn't work out, we're going to have the whole board over just for a spaghetti night outside of the normal meeting.
Can't do it. See, I mentioned you can't do it because of sunshine law. So if we open up something, it has to be open to the public, and you don't have that much spaghetti. So
Keep me honest.
My understanding is tour is like, as opposed to the actual meeting. That is yet to be organized.
So we're working on it, but the goal, honestly, for all you guys is that we want to, as I say, we all depend on the fire department. If there's an emergency, we want to be much more proactive with them. And I hear Bill saying the same thing. Guys like this are on the water. He's in front of these guys, Dave. So thank you all again for the support. So a couple quick notes. First of all, I want to apologize to both our attendees as well as the applicants. We have two waiver applications. We're going to get to you a little later. And again, I apologize for the delay. But right now we are going to take a moment to celebrate Port Everglades. Mr. Glenn Wiltshire. So let me introduce this gentleman. I had the great pleasure of being in included on Port Everglades Harbor Safety Committee. Port Everglades, safe to say, is familiar to all of us. In front of you, you have some, take care, guys, thank you. You have a hat that was courtesy of Port Everglades. You have some information there.
Yeah.
Again, we talk
Steve?
about out of sight. Yes.
Do you just have any more of the?
Yeah.
stuff?
Here's, so,
We're good. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Steve. Sorry about
There's that on the back of that.
two old guys, you know, I took this thing, so I did, so,
Oh.
so Glenn Wiltshire is deputy port director. What goes on at the port, it's safe to say, again, is the lifeblood of our community, and we talk about voting capital world, and, you know, we look at the, as I was told at the very beginning, when I first started to work with Glenn and Brian Gove, who's supervisor of operations, is what the port does is very port centric, and I understand that. But when it comes to fire safety, and it comes to PD and water, et cetera, these are this is very respectfully, this is the elephant in the room. And I'm thrilled to have you join us and be a part of this group. And there's a number of us that are involved with the Port Everglades Harbor Safety Committee, and thrilled to see that grow. With that in mind, I simply don't speak any higher about an individual as I do with Glenn. It's been a pleasure to join that group. And I think that we are building a strong, mutually beneficial relationship with the port. And I asked Glenn if he'd be kind enough to come give us kind of a look at what goes on behind the scenes. Because similar to what Chief Pinball did, we don't really see it every day. And, you know, these are the shining parts of our community. But with that, I'm going to introduce Glenn Wiltshire, who will give us again good background, and we are thrilled.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. Good evening, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I know some of you, others, I don't, but always a great opportunity to talk about Port Everglades, your port. Before I get into the slide, so most people know, but a lot of people don't know. Port Everglades is a Broward County department. So it's like the county has a public works department and, you know, all the other departments. So we're part of the county. But the difference is we're an enterprise fund, which means we don't get any local tax dollars. So all of the things we do at the port, all the money we generate at the port from the commercial activity stays in the port. So I'm going to move pretty quick because, you know, Steve said, give me a sense of what goes on there during the day. So day in the life of the port. So if the video works, we'll start with this is 3:30 a.m. Oh, on a busy weekend.
They only come in at overnight, but
They come in, just start about 3:30 in the morning. There's 8 shifts, like they say. Come in every half hour. And you come in order based on what first they're going. Typically, some of them will come in down first. Some of them will come in stern first because they want to get out faster. I'm today when they sail out of the port.
great work.
So the sun has finally risen. Being ready for people. So those are the cruise ships that are coming in, but we also have cargo ships and petroleum tankers coming in. So these three pictures sort of illustrate the size. On the left, largest container ship that we've had come in. That ship is almost 4 football fields long, a little over 1,100 feet. Half a football field wide, 158 feet. And if it's fully loaded, which you see it's not here, would need 50 feet of water. We only have 42 feet of water at the port, so they have to come in lightly loaded, which is the one. In the center, that's what's called an Aframax tanker. And it will carry in, get my statistics here, about 31 million gallons at full capacity of petroleum products. It's a short one, only 800 feet long, and about 140 feet wide. And on the right, a typical cruise ship, the largest cruise ship that we get in is 1,200 feet long, 213 feet wide. And fortunately, we have no bridges in the way, but 236 feet tall, what we call the aircraft. So they're pretty sizable ships that are coming in every day. Last year we had, get the right number here, 4,655 ship transits in and out of the port. So we're pretty busy, 24/7. Critical partners, the pilots. Bob Swindell was on the what was that called? The
Board of Pilot
Board of
Commissioners.
Pilot Commissioners. So pilots are a private organization regulated by the state. There's 18 of them. And they work basically 30 days on, 30 days off. So at all times. And they're the ones that are guiding the ships in. You can see a couple of their pilots' boats, but they also rely heavily on tugboats. So we have two different companies that have a total of 5 tugboats at the port. One of our requirements, because we don't have a fireboat, BSO has something small that they don't call it a fireboat because of the way it was paid for. But as I say, but there was port security. It was used for port security purposes. But the tugboats have anywhere from 3,000 to 9,000 gallons per minute capability, and has a requirement that they have to do that to augment and really train very closely with BSO if we need large volumes of water from the shore side, land side, water side. The tugboats get pressed into service as part of our team. So we have air traffic control, but it's not in the air, it's on the water. So we have a harbor master tower, that's our air traffic control tower. We try to do public art. So that's actually, we're in the process of refreshing the mural on the side, but that's our harbor master tower, world renowned. And we have people on duty 24/7. They're the ones that are assigning what times the ships come in, what berth they're going to go to. So and those are all port staff. When a ship gets in, it's got to be tied up. We're one of the few ports that actually has the line handlers work for the county. In many other places, they're contracted, third party, but at Port Everglades, they're there 24/7 working for us. And you can imagine on that ship, that 8-ship cruise day, where all those ships are coming in, and they're basically leapfrogging from berth to berth, just like the pilots are bringing the ship in, getting in the pilot boat and going back out again. So part of a team effort. Security and safety, critical. 1/3 of the entire petroleum supply for the state of Florida comes through Port Everglades. 4 million cruise passengers pass through Port Everglades every year. So we take safety and security very seriously. We spend a ton of money. $12 million is what BSO Fire Rescue gets for the services they provided at the port. BSO DLE gets about $18 million. About 1/3 of our operating budget actually goes to safety and security. But there's our partners. I got to get the city of Fort Lauderdale on there, Chief. Now that you're committed to have that boat out there more often.
Every year you should call.
But it's a team effort. It's a team sport. Security, you're relying on a layered approach. So on any given time, it may be a BSO boat out there, it may be FWC, it may be the Coast Guard. City of Hollywood comes up occasionally, but not that often. Now, all those ships came in, those people got to get on and off. So the morning rush is all those people trying to get off. They're trying to get to the hotels. They're trying to get to attractions. They're trying to get to the airport. So it's a major logistics thing. We're to get the people off, but at the same time, the provisions are starting to go back on. One of those large cruise ships will have 40 truckloads of provisions coming and loading up all the things that the people want to consume while they're there. And Steve made a comment about holding up ships because of lobsters. I don't know, when they leave, but I can tell you in my younger day, I was the Coast Guard captain of the port in New York, and we held a cruise ship. We released it at 1700, 5 p.m. It didn't sail till midnight. we blamed the Coast Guard for holding them back, but the reality was they had a shipment of meat coming up and it didn't get there in time. It caught in New York traffic. But a lot of stuff goes down there. We also have a rail facility. So trains are coming in typically, and you've gotten caught on them, I'm sure, on 84 and other crossings. But before 2014, there was no on-port storage capability. Now we can accommodate 9,000 feet of train plus an additional 3,000 for shuffling around. So all of the trains that are bringing in cargo or leaving taking cargo out of the port are coming into what we call the ICTF, Intermodal Container Transfer Facility. And that's operated by the Florida East Coast Railway. Petroleum, as I said, we're 1/3 of the state's entire fuel supply. We have 13 different privately owned petroleum transfer facilities and storage facilities in the port that are there every day. And that's just happens. You see the ship, you see the pipelines that go from the ship into those storage tanks. We have over 200 storage tanks, reportedly the largest non-refinery storage capacity on the East Coast, east of the Mississippi River. And that's part of why it costs so much for BSO Fire, because they have very specialized industrial firefighting. I think most of the departments in Broward County have gotten out of the foam business. I don't know how much you've got in your stockpile there, Chief, but so we have tens of thousands of gallons of firefighting foam because water and fire don't mix. So, but firefighting foam, when that's mixed in, and I saw it on the one response there. So we've got that capacity, and we routinely actually send it out the gate through mutual aid to other situations throughout Broward County. Containers, we move over 1 million, almost 1.1 million of those containers TEUs. So the little short, you can see that pic there is 2 20-foot containers. So when we measure containers, it's by TEU, 20-foot equivalent units. So typically we'll have 5 to 10 of these container ships coming in each day, and they're delivering boxes and they're taking boxes away because Port Everglades is one of the few seaports in the country that is a net export. We refer to ourselves as the grocery store for Latin America because a lot of things that are coming in as imports are for consumption, and then we're loading containers back on. The containers themselves, privately owned. The companies that handle the containers, privately owned. Lease space from us. We're a landlord port. The cranes we own ourselves and maintain them, and then the container terminal provides the operator when they're loading and offloading the ship. After they get off the ship, they go into the yard. There's typically, you'll see, if you see a stack 4, 5, 6 high, that means they're empty. Because if they were full, they wouldn't be able to take the weight. And a white container is generally what's referred to as a reefer container. It's a refrigerated container. You're buying Chiquita bananas at Publix, they're coming in through Port Everglades. Their ship was 2 days late last weekend. But Publix got them. Specialized cargo as well. On the left, you'll see that is a reefer ship. It uses its own cranes instead of using the port's cranes. But it's in a service between Central America and here to deliver melons. So the melon season, November to May, they come in. Their facility is actually in Pompano. They bring in full containers, haul them up to Pompano, bring the empties back, and then they go back down, and it's a 7-day trip. In the center is what's referred to as a RoRo, roll-on, roll-off ship. Very challenging from a fire standpoint, fire response standpoint. There's unfortunately been some tragedies here in the U.S. the last couple of years, but the vehicles drive in and out. Above that, cement. We have 2 cement terminals, all the cement used in South Florida to build all the stuff we want, come in through those two cement terminals. And then finally on the right, yachts. We're the yacht capital of the world. So that particular ship is what's called a float on, float off. So it's like a floating dry dock. So they come in. Some of those yachts are destined for here. Some of them may be going to other places. They take on ballast, float down. They pull out the yachts that are staying here, pump the ballast out, and then go on to their next stop. And that's why we have the largest yacht throughput in the United States as well. The boat show doesn't hurt. Right? A lot for that. Now it's the afternoon. The passengers have to start arriving to go back on the ship. So that's our cruise terminal 25, which is our newest terminal, sort of purpose designed for celebrity cruises. And then the labor who's putting, gathering the luggage and getting it onto the ship. Once again, private party, International Longshoremen's Association. So it's union labor for that. And we have 8 terminals. So on a busy day, all 8 terminals, all 26,000 people are trying to get on the ship at the same time. So don't arrive at the port between 11:30 and 12:30, or you'll be waiting a while to get through traffic. Gas and jet fuel, I already mentioned that. 1,300 tank trucks a day leave the port. Jet fuel goes to MIA by pipeline. Jet fuel goes to FLL by pipeline. But if it's going to Key West, if it's going to Palm Beach, it's going to Southwest Florida International, it's going by truck as well. So it's a 24/7 operation. Once again, all private facilities on the port, but have a fire risk vector to them that we have to deal with on a 24/7 basis. Goes out by truck as well. 80% of the cargo that comes into the port stays within 80 miles of it. Because we're consuming 6 million population here in South Florida. So that's good for us because people like to eat and buy stuff, and it comes in through Port Everglades. The trains, they come, the trains, they leave. The interesting thing about the facility is about 60% of the rail traffic is domestic. So UPS, Amazon, some of those others who are moving goods around the country come in, but they never come into the port. So about 60% of it is traffic that is destined. Your UPS that didn't want to drive the truck here, they put it on the train and brought it down. And at the end of the day, of course, the parade has to occur in the opposite direction. So this particular shot is still light because they leave around between 3 and 5 p.m. because the sooner they can leave, the less fuel they got to burn to get to their destination the next day. But in this particular picture, you can see there's 6 ships in a row. Royal Caribbean, that is Oasis of the Seas, I think, which is the 6th largest cruise ship in the world. Royal Caribbean has this thing of every time they build a new ship, they make it a foot longer so they can always claim that they just released the world's largest cruise ship. So that's the numbers. I think I've touched on them. 4 million multi-day passengers, almost 1.1 million TEUs of cargo, 5.4 billion gallons of petroleum products moving through every day. And then it creates jobs, $26 billion worth of economic activity, over 10,000 direct jobs. Now, Port Everglades Department, we have 260 employees because we're basically the public works, keeping the facilities operating. See, we always like to point out, although we get none of the dollars, $925 million of taxes were collected by the activity that goes on through the port. We've got a bunch of stuff coming up in the future. For those who have ever worked their way down 17th Street and US 1, the bypass road under construction, opening up in October to go along with the hotel and convention center expansion. Sand bypass project, which is offshore, to take some of that sand that gets pushed offshore. If you've ever gone to Dania Beach and tried to go to the beach there, after the beach replenishment for a while, it's a bunch of rock. So it's a project to preserve that sand. And finally, the Airport Seaport Convention Center Connector, which will be a light rail system for passengers to come in. They can come to the seaport, they can go to the convention center, and then eventually it'll actually head up 17th up Andrews and serve the western on the, other side. Anyone who might have saw Channel 10 last night, there was a great story about the coral reefs and our deepening and widening project and the planned $600 million of a $1.3 billion project that will focus on preservation of coral and various other environmental things. But we're also working on shore power, so the cruise ships, when they're here, can plug in. FP&L likes it, they'll sell more electricity. And then as the ships get bigger, we have to expand. So, because this is about boating safety, I figured this couple of pictures would be good. That's what a typical pilot sees coming in the morning on a weekend. Fortunately, they're parting the waters for them. Sometimes the bow wake has to be used to push them out of the way. And then on the right, you know, who would think about trying to cut between two large ships other than that person? So we take that seriously, and that's where the Harbor Safety Committee comes in. I left them on the table here. I buried it under my Bible. We have a little flyer that the Harbor Safety Committee created. If you want to pick one up on your way out, we call it Operation Clear Channel. It basically tries to tell mariners, hey, you know, the rule of tonnage applies. Your 25-foot boat and that 1,200-foot ship, you got to stay out of their way. Most people don't even realize that at the entrance channel, there is actually a regulated navigation area that was established in 2003, I think it was, that is slow speed. Now, how many boaters go slow speed through that area? But there's actually a regulation that says what they're supposed to do. So grab one of these. They reminded me that it's called Operation Clear Channel. When I was the captain of the port in New York in 2005, we had a similar problem in Sandy Hook Channel. So we partnered with the local law enforcement, with the Coast Guard, with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and created Operation Clear Channel. And then about 14 years later, they came and said, oh, Captain, we're going to use what you came up with. I said, no, it doesn't matter. My name's not on it. But it's challenges. And that's why we have to balance on any given day. That's the challenge of whether it's the law enforcement, the fire rescue out there. Public is educating the public. I also teach boating safety classes as a Coast Guard auxiliarist. And typically the people don't have a clue. Even the ones who, when I do my survey and say, you know, how many years experience? Oh, I've been boating for 25 years. And then they, at the end of the class, say, well, I didn't know a lot of that stuff. There's a, you know, large ship. Stay out of the way of large ships. With that, that's the end of my story. So, thank you once again. Try to make
So, sorry, first of all, am I correct? Does this guy kick ass? I mean, this is the real deal. Rockstar is right. It truly.
how much does that cost? Small bill.
So, so a couple things real quickly. Thrilled to have you. Would you, if you don't mind, you do have a boating safety coming up. Am I correct shortly?
Yes.
So would you let us know when that is for the public?
So we alternate between the Marine Industries Association and the Plantation Police Department. So our next class would be February 15th in Plantation. And then we'll be on March 15th, I think, patients were down at the Marine Industries Association. And you can go online just through the Coast Guard Auxiliary website and find it. So we love having people there. You know, our target really is the newest boaters because you know, they just don't know. They don't know. You know, I remember we had one group that went to the boat show, bought a boat,
$149 a month. That's all they
you know, and they went to the place where they were picking it up, and they handed them the keys, and they said, "Oh, okay." They lived on a canal, probably about 3 miles away. They had no clue how to even get it home.
We can all tell more stories.
And no, but it is a challenge. it's nice, you know, how many, there's 45,000 plus or minus registered boats in, Broward County, over 1 million in the state of Florida. And some weekends, it seems like they're all out there, but, you know, I think it's groups like this that, you know, can take the lead. I understand there may be some legislation, up in the, in Tallahassee this year to look at, should there be a minimum age for boaters, you know? If people are surprised, you know, I've had 8-year-olds pass our test. Now, they were ringers because they were Naval Sea Cadets. So they, you know, they had something to them, but in the state of Florida, you pass the test, you get the card. As a matter of regulation, you can go out there on your own.
That was, this was one of the items that we discussed, one of the initiatives going forward. How much do we overstep? You know, who's required to have a boating safety license? Coming from Connecticut 10 years ago, if you're under 12, you need a boating safety license. Not that you should be operating a boat anyway. There are folks that think that older individuals need refresher courses. We've talked about signage, turn your VHF on, all the things that you share as well. So, any further questions from Mr. Wiltshire? It's truly a pleasure before we let you go from the public. So let me thank you from us. You get two things. You get the now world famous MAB M&Ms. Then you also get, because we
Take them to work because my wife won't like it if I bring.
many times, and you also get the official butt of the board. You are awesome. We appreciate you. We really are thrilled to have you join us. And what this all means is we're going to have you back.
Now, thank you.
So I have one for Brian. and
Okay,
I will drop
yeah,
it off.
Brian unfortunately couldn't
Yep.
make it tonight, so,
Glenn,
no, thank you for inviting me. I'm gonna leave some cards here, so if anybody has any questions, wants to reach out. We do port tours, you know, we can't do individual tours, but we like if there's an organization out there that wants to learn more about the port, actually see those cranes. Occasionally, we have people actually go up the cranes, which are 175 feet high.
We'll skip that.
So
When-
let's get
Can you
that.
talk about just for a second, their low profile cranes?
Oh, yeah, no, it's good.
Why they are?
Good thing. So the positive that we always say, we're 2 miles from the airport. So a cruise passenger should fly in the day before their cruise, because they may not make their ship if they are late, but, so 2 miles, so it's 10 minutes, $15, whatever it is to get there. However, with it being within 2 miles of the airport, you know, the FAA insists that we give space for the planes to take off. So those low profile cranes, the ones that we saw on the one slide that are blue, sourced in China, you might have heard a lot about China lately, $15 million a piece, but they are specially designed. So instead of being an A-frame, which like you see in a lot of ports where when they're done, they move up, well, they slide back and forth. And literally the design is such that there's 1.5 feet between the highest point in the crane and the lowest point of the flight surface. Now, will a plane ever get low? No. Probably at 1,000 feet, 1,500. But they're designed in a way, and the flight surfaces are laid out in a way that in the worst case, fully loaded plane, you know, how often do you see a plane with 4 engines anymore? You don't. So there's 2 engines, so they call it OEI, one engine and operator. So it's designed that at the worst point in takeoff where they can't stop and they lose an engine, there's plenty of margin of safety between what may be underneath them and the airspace they're going to go up in. So that's good. It's a good point because people don't realize that there's about a 20% premium for those kind of cranes compared to typical A-frame. But once again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. It's great Steve is ably representing you on the Harbor Safety Committee, which we're trying to do, not just look at what goes on in the port, but look at what goes on in the region. So thank you once again. Thanks, Steve.
Have a nice evening.
All
Thank
right,
you.
so I got mine.
I'll drop off Brian's.
Okay. All right.
So that was, you know, it's again, we joked about with, Chief Pingo and Chad, how, you know, it's like little kids at the fire station. Driving through the port yesterday, et cetera. again, it's just, eye-opening. And we're thrilled to have these guys. So I apologize again for the delay. Let's move forward now to the fun part of this, agenda. And we are coming now to our first dock waiver. And I will introduce, and I apologize for pronouncing Nick's last name wrong. I'm not sure if Andrew even know, but it is Nick Diorio. Nick was gracious enough to join us before he presented, and I'm gonna let him, if you don't mind, explain in his own words how we got to where we are and what he's looking to accomplish. Nick, you got the floor. I did kind of. Come sit, come sit. So welcome, Nick. Nick is on behalf of he and his wife Sharon Diorio. This is regarding a dock waiver at 1414 Southeast 12th Street, slip number 11. This is a 21 unit condominium known as Hemingway Condos. Folks are probably familiar with it. Beautiful site, and you got.
Thank you, Chairman Whitten and board members. My name is Nicholas Diorio. So my Nick, my friends, and to you also as my friends. My wife and I, as mentioned, on 1414 Southeast 12th Street, Riverdale on QC, and we're assigned slip number 11. Looking to eventually, residents of California, looking to eventually retire and move to Fort Lauderdale, where we were married 40 years ago. So coming back home, but we're able to find this condo and it looked very interesting. So we made a purchase in April of 2023, and the previous owner had received Broward County environmental license for a floating dock and installed the floating dock with the approval of the condominium board in writing. Resident, which is well documented and known to the current board that was previously approved. We acquired the slip number 11 and lived peacefully for about a year. And our friend in the corner of the room, Marco, was with code enforcement. And one morning at 5 a.m., 8 o'clock Eastern time, I get a call from Marco that says, I'm standing in front of your floating dock and your condominium board and a gentleman named Jim Magruder, who's the condominium manager, is asking that I give you a violation. I said, no, Marco. I said, that's not real. It already has. The previous owner has told me it has a Broward County environmental permit and he has approval of the board. So you must be mistaken. Oh, no. And Marco, if I'm saying anything wrong, please step right up. But Marco said, no, I was called out here and was pointing to here and over there that there's all these violations by both the condominium manager and by your board. Marco said we went back into the garage and spoke with your board, and Marco said, you realize what you're asking, if I give a violation, it's going to start a real chain reaction. And they said, oh, no, we want to use the board to enforce the city for compliance of some unknown issue. And somebody pointed at my floating dock. Now, you're going to hear a lot tonight from other people that may have agendas totally unrelated to this floating dock. And they'll be bringing up all kinds of things to try to convince you that this floating dock is in violation. November 12th, I stood before you. There was a public announcement that went out to 300 feet for all surrounding. And we can go back and look at the video. There was not one objection or anyone speaking against it. You voted unanimously on November 12th, 12 votes to 0, to make a recommendation to the City Commission for approval of this floating dock. I then moved on to the City Commission on December 17th, and everything changed. There's something politically going on in this condominium or with some of these objectors to stop something unrelated to the dock that you're going to hear about tonight. And we'll go through the objections, and I will tell you some of the misconceptions and falsities that you're going to hear from paid attorneys at $500, $1,000 an hour, representing someone, not me, against this floating dock that you already have voted on and justified through the extraordinary circumstances and approved unanimously. So let me read while we're here, and I want to thank Andrew for doing a great job in summarizing in the staff memo. And I couldn't explain it any better, so if I could, I'll read one paragraph that Andrew put together, tells you why we're here tonight. At the November 12th, 2004 meeting, the applicant requested and received a recommendation of approval for an existing 31.5 feet by 12 feet floating vessel platform, which extended a maximum of 36.4 feet into the adjacent Cerro Gordo River. At the December 17th, 2024 City Commission, Condominium Association representation alleged that the platform extended beyond the 30% mark. The alleged discrepancy was based upon the applicant's usage of a Google measurement tool, as well as inconsistencies within the provided boundary survey. We'll address all those issues. The applicant has resubmitted a plan which shortens the floating dock platform by 20 inches to ensure compliance with the 30% based upon a site-specific waterway width of 120 feet. Please remember that width of 120 feet, because you'll hear a lot about that. The city surveyor, who is a Florida licensed city surveyor and mapper, has confirmed this waterway width is accurate as provided within attached width of Cerro Gordo River memorandum at the request of Assistant City Attorney Duncan. The distance this structure extends from the property line into the waterway is shown in the survey and summarized in the table below. As modified, we're asking for a waiver of 9.73 feet, and therefore the structure distance from the property line. And again, the property line is the key word here, since that is how the ULDR zoning code is written, is 34.73. So let's go back to the 120 feet. 120 feet times 30%, which is allowed for boats to be docked, keeping the 40% in the center of the channel free, would be 30% of 120 is 36 feet. We are at 34.73. Therefore, you will hear later that there's violation and there could be, and it extends out. We are within our slip and do not extend beyond our legal slip that we are on. I don't care if legal counsel comes and tries to convince you that is all falsities. Okay, if we could go to the presentation. The first slide is just a photo of the floating vessel platform upon my purchase. And that was taken probably at the either in 2022 or early 2023. Slide one, please. Slide one is a aerial of part of the marina, and it's just for reference. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see a Zodiac type vessel. That is specifically slip number 11, and that is the subject slip. Unfortunately, when I purchased, I didn't get the Zodiac, so I only got the dive. Slide two. Slide two is a email that the city surveyor, who is a Florida licensed surveyor, provided to Mr. Dunkel, and is public information. I cut and pasted that, and he clearly shows in the highlight that the waterway from property line to property line, don't be convinced by somebody telling you that it's face of seawall, wet face. You'll hear all these terms. The width is measured from property line to property line at 120 feet, as certified by a Florida surveyor. And the only purpose of me coming back here is for two reasons. And I'd like us to focus tonight on just those two reasons, because you're going to hear a lot of other stuff. And those two reasons are, at the city commission, could you establish the width of the waterway from property line to property line? And then could you show that your floating vessel platform does not infringe beyond 30% of that newly established number? I shouldn't say newly established, confirmed number of 120 feet. That's where the mathematics of 30% equals 36 feet, and we're only at 30. Okay, next slide, please. This is the subject memo that Mr. Dunkel requested, written by Michael Donaldson, Florida licensed surveyor and employee of the city. Page 1, it's in your package. I just put it on the screen and make reference. Going to page 2. In the top of page 2, you'll see I'm sorry, it's small there, but it's in your package. Mr. Donaldson concludes that the waterway from property line to property line is 120 feet, which is exactly what the city commissioners, who you obviously send your recommendation to, ask for us to establish. Next slide, please. Mr. Donaldson based his information on a calculation. And that calculation is based on something we all need to respect, and that is a Broward County recorded documents related to plats. And he took this plat, and the next slide, please, and this plat, analyze those recorded plats now, analyze the calculation, and you'll hear later that, oh, he subtracted and he added and he did this. He's a surveyor. He knows what he's doing. And came up with 120 feet from a recorded plat, something we have to live by. And I just do want to tell you a little side. One of the requirements from the city commission was, oh, you need to get a survey. So I started, and this was December 17th. So here it is, Christmas week. And I'm making calls to every licensed surveyor I could find in Broward and Dade and Palm Beach counties. And I spoke to a gentleman in Lake Worth. And he said, okay, what's your problem? And yeah, maybe I can fit it in. And so I explained, I said, here's what you have to do. And the city is requiring that I determine the property line to property line. So he said, well, you don't need a survey. Don't? No, sir. You don't need a survey. He said, is it a recent subdivision? I said, oh no, this is in the Rio Vista section of Fort Lauderdale. It's one of the older sections. He said, you have recorded plats in Broward County records. All you have to do is find the plat that's been recorded. That'll establish the property line on the south, the plat that's recorded, property line on the north. The calculation of 120 feet is the distance from property line. He said, let me tell you. He said, you'll hear people use the word survey, topographic, and boundary. He said, what you have is, or need, is research to find the property line to property line based on plats. You do not need a topographic, because what that does is identifies the land-based improvements or water-based improvements, if it happened to be a seawall, that change from time to time. People build new seawalls, people build new fences, all those things changes what's appear on a topographic. No one can rely on a topographic to establish your property line. What you need, because the code is written from property line to property line, is the boundary of property line to property line based on the recorded plats, which never changes unless there is a new plat recorded to supersede an old plat. So don't listen to anything you're going to hear about this changed and there's questions and we did a survey. They spend our money as a condominium owner to get a topographic plat. And they're going to bring that up tonight, wave that in front of you and say, we have a topographic survey. That doesn't mean anything. That shows the improvements that have been built, not the property line. And ask them to look in the lower right-hand corner and read to you, and it'll say, this is not a boundary survey, and therefore should not be used to establish property line property. Next slide.
I would also point out that that topographic survey on its face says it's a measurement from wet face to wet face.
It does. It does. This is an interesting slide. And you'll hear tonight that we don't believe that the waterway is 120 feet. Okay, you don't, because you represent who? An owner maybe, or another owner, or the board. Interesting, when I signed my condominium documents, he gave me a stack like that, right? We all, if some of you live in condominiums, you've gone through it. You get a thing called declaration, right? And in there, there's declarations. Every owner in this condominium complex has signed those declarations. Therefore, they've seen this document. They may not remember seeing it, but they've seen this document. And this document included in the recorded condominium declarations from 2010, I believe it's October 16th, no, 2009, I'm sorry, October 16th, 2009. So therefore, any owner that's going to send a high-priced attorney here tonight and tell you that we didn't know how wide the canal is not telling you the truth. The truth is, this is in their declarations, and it's their obligation to look it up and determine, and you'll see from the highlighted, it's 60 feet to the center of the channel, 60 feet to the other side, adding those together comes up to the same 120 feet, and it hasn't moved since the original plats were recorded. Next slide, please. The next thing that the city commission asked after the 120 feet was established is, do you exceed more than 30% of the width of 120 feet, which would equal 36? According to some documentation, which we could rely on, but again, they will waive that topographic survey. So therefore, for no question, and this was exactly per the recommendation of Mayor Trentalis, he said, why don't you just cut 1.5 feet off your dock? So therefore, I went to the original manufacturer of the installer of the dock, and they suggested the cubes, which are 20 by 20, be removed, bring the dock closer to the seawall, and shorten the dock by 20 inches. Next slide, please. There's a sketch of the previous dock on the left, and again, there you'll see the 36.4, which means it extended beyond the 30% by about 4.8 inches. And the reconfigured dock, which was performed on January 17th, which now extends 34.73. And again, just to make it clear, 34.73 is less than 36 feet. Next slide, please. This is a slide from a photo on January 17th. Prior to the removal, you will notice on the neck or throat or walkway of the floating dock, there were 4 sets of tubes prior to the modification. Next slide, please. After the modification in the afternoon of January 17th, you will notice there's only 3. Therefore, that dock was shortened by 20 inches or 1.67 feet. If all dimensions are done in feet, I want to make sure that you know the conversion from 20 inches to 1.67 feet. Next slide, please. This is something I put together, and from the bogus topographic survey that someone will present to you later tonight, I'm sure, is showed in my floating dock extending beyond the 30% line. However, I took the 20, I scaled it, took the 20 inches off the dock, drew it in red, and therefore you can see that the shortened dock does not extend beyond the 30%. And again, to go back to the city commission's requirements, the only reason I'm here is for 2 things. One, to establish the width of the canal at 120 feet, and to establish that I don't extend beyond 30% of the established width. Next slide, please. This one says it all, and it's my conclusion slide. You will see, taking property line to property line that's been established by Mr. Donaldson, I plotted 120 feet on the longer arrow to the right, which shows 120 feet property line to property line, then took the center section from the 30% line to the opposite side 30% line, and came up with 48 feet or 40% of width of unobstructed navigable waterway as measured from property line to property line. There is no violation of that 30%, even though you'll hear plenty of other comments. Just to be proactive, I'd like to go through some of the objections that I'm sure you've seen and some of the bogus information that you'll hear. This is a letter that was a board objection. Interesting, it is signed by a Linda Danoff. And when I was here on November 12th and received your unanimous approval, I went back and I wrote to the board, since they were very supportive of my efforts to come and receive a waiver. So I wrote back to the board and said I was very successful at the Marine Advisory Board. I received a 12-0 recommendation for approval. And the first email I received back was from Mrs. Danoff, who said, "Congratulations, great to hear it. When you get the city approval, the violation's going away, way to go." Something happened, or somebody got to someone at a higher level, and all of a sudden, everything changed. Why in November was everyone in favor? There was no high-priced attorneys here speaking. Everyone was in favor, and now everything changed. You're going to hear a lot of stories tonight. Don't believe them. The logic that Mrs. Danoff uses, and she is president of a board that has had so many defections, we're, as an owner, we're not sure we even have them. No one wants to serve on the board. Fortunately, you'll hear from someone later in the other waiver, and his wife fortunately volunteered, and I wish her the best. But you will hear that she makes 2 points for objection. One, she says our floating dock is modified, extends beyond, okay? Our floating dock is modified is completely within our assigned slip 11. So the board statement that it creates a substantial encroachment into a shared and navigable space. Nobody should be in my slip. So therefore it's not shared and it's not navigable to anyone but me, because it's my slip. So that comment that you're going to see in the package that she sent you is absurd. The second, and this one really gets me, a boat on your floating vessel platform is likely to extend beyond 30% of the width. If we go back one slide, there we go. We've got the shortened dock right there. She's saying if it puts a boat on there, that it could extend beyond. I think that may be correct. It could extend beyond. Also, there could be a boat in slip 11, I'm sorry, in slip 12, that extends 40 feet out. There could be one in slip 10 that extends 45 feet out. Her position that it is likely that your boat is going to extend and the other ones aren't is again absurd. And if it does, you call Marco or his replacement, congratulations on your new assignment, but you'll call code enforcement, they'll come out, they'll measure and say, you know, you're right, you're extended beyond. But after going through this process, I can tell you, I will not have a boat that extends beyond beyond my edge of my floating dock. So that's the board's objections, which I believe I've diffused. You're going to see a package that starts something like this. And what this is like an old newspaper. You're going to see a topographic survey that somebody's going to put up that has no basis of even being presented at the Marine Advisory Board. If someone did their research, they would find out that a topographic survey is irrelevant to establishing property line to property line. So don't be persuaded by someone trying to present something that's inaccurate. You're again going to see something like this that shows extending beyond the 30% line. Again, old news. That's like reading last week's newspaper. You're going to see photos like this. Hard to see, but maybe if you have a color package in yours, I was only provided with the black and white. But you'll see many other vessels extending beyond. There's slip 11 with the floating dock, very difficult to see. Tried to draw it in a red line, but you'll see other vessels extending well beyond. No objections to those vessels, but they came after and told Marco to sign me up. You'll see other photos like this with boats extending beyond. And you'll see photos like this with no date on it, so you don't know if that before it was shortened, after it's shortened, you can't count the number of cubes. Well, I guess you can. No, you can't count the number of cubes, so you don't even know, no date to show when the documentation was taken. Then you'll find something like this, which is a slide that I prepared that's going to be used in an objector's package. So they couldn't even find their own slide to put in here. They used mine so they could put it in their package. But you'll see many boats extending beyond that. You're going to hear from another attorney that represents an owner. I've never met the gentleman. He does not answer any phone calls. I thought as a common owner, I was contacted many times, but I did get a response from his attorney who just today provided some objections. And again, these are almost as absurd as the lady from the president of the association. She has confirmed, and I believe she's an attorney. I did not see, I did search the license to see if she was a licensed surveyor in the state of Florida. I did not see her name as a licensed surveyor. But she concluded, or she's alleging, that the city surveyor's conclusion of the width of the canal to be 120 feet. But this was based on an analysis, not an actual survey. Correct. Let's go back to the gentleman in Fort Worth who is a licensed surveyor who said, you don't need a survey. You have plats that are recorded in Broward County record. Let's go back to the slide that the gentleman that she represents signed when he purchased his condominium. We go back a few slides. Right there. This was in his closing package. It establishes his width at 120 feet. If he bought in 2020 or 2021, he had plenty of time and objection at the time of his closing to complain about the width of the canal in front of his condominium. Don't wait till I come to the Marine Advisory Board and then question with an attorney that 120 feet is not the width of the canal. Also, this attorney might bring up that you did not find extraordinary circumstances. That's over. You voted 12 to nothing. You found extraordinary circumstances and you made that recommendation to the city commission. We're not here to debate what you did in November. We're here for two reasons, and that is width of the canal and the 30%. You're also going to hear view. Now, that is something that they'll speak real low about because we're not supposed to talk about the view, but you'll hear. So here's a letter of another owner that talks about the view. And if I could, it's in your package in letter of support. I am absolutely in favor of your floating dock being there and hopefully approved by the Marine Advisory Board along with the City of Fort Lauderdale, he means the City Commission, in regard to its extension beyond 25 foot, but not exceeding the maximum 30% width from property line to property. Your floating dock is the slip directly in front of my unit. And it is obvious to my eyesight that it is not infringing or limiting canal access. I sincerely hope the Marine Advisory Board and the City of Fort Lauderdale approve the allowance of your floating dock. The gentleman that's right in front. And that does address the subject of view. Chairman Whitten, I have completed my formal presentation. However, because I believe you will hear objections that are either unrelated or false, I would like to have the availability to review any other testimony that you may hear from others.
Absolutely, you'll be invited back, of course.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Thank you.
excellent presentation. Safe to say you've invested a lot of time. I know that opposition has as well. So, thank you very much. I would ask, are there anybody who's personally for Mr. Diorio? Anybody? Anybody from the public have questions before we proceed? So thank you, Nick. Again, we'll have you back. You know what, we try to follow some procedures here, but we want to make sure we do what's fair for everybody, so everybody will have an opportunity to speak. We have anybody to speak in support or opposition who has signed in? Please let us know. Come up, please. Anybody who's here?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Cam Rogers, the attorney on behalf of the board.
I'm sorry, Sue. What's your first name?
Cam, C-A-M, Rogers,
And on behalf of which board?
Hemingway Association.
Would you mind speaking up?
Oh, the Hemingway Association Board. And you mind going on to that slideshow? Thank you.
We have an issue where, from last month, our microphones don't necessarily pick up all the conversation. So when Andre's asking to speak loud, the folks are watching him. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, board. Some of you that were on the board, I guess it was probably back in the middle of last year. We were here on behalf of the Hemingway Association Board because there was a citation for every unit owner, all 21 slips, received for pilings that extended beyond the 25-foot limitation under the ULDR 47-19.3B, I believe it is. So that was obviously a community-wide violation that had to be addressed. We approached this board. The board provided a waiver, keeping in mind that these pilings were put into the marina when at the beginning of the development of the condominium. So they hadn't been tampered with, hadn't been moved, other than a few that were addressed, that were lifts were later put into the marina. So if you could go to the next slide, please, be great. So that's just the aerial. You can go to the next slide, please. So this marks the two issues that are at hand. I'm not going to address the other one because I'll save that until Mr. Walsh has a chance to present his waiver request. But the one there and highlighted right in the middle, that's what we're talking about. And Mr. Diorio has already explained that to you. So you can go on to the next slide. You can see in that middle highlighted area, the lighter green area is the amount that extends beyond the 25 feet limitation. So that's what we're looking at. That's really what's being debated upon here.
Cam, when I look at this on my computer, the stuff that's in red,
was largely illegible. Could you go through and point to each one and read what that text is for the benefit?
I actually have it highlighted a little bit closer in the next slide. I think we'll get to that, that's right. So you can go on to the next slide, please. So here we have, and I'm just giving you a summary, that the one to the right is actually the lift that we're going to be talking about next. Let's focus on the left. That is the floating vessel platform that we're discussing. Again, it's a little bit closer. And you can't really see it, but the above area here actually pinpoints the actual property line. So the topographical survey that was discussed gives the distance from the seawall to the end of the floating dock. In this situation, on the survey, that 2009 survey that actually shown earlier, the property line is actually inside, meaning inland of the seawall. So we're actually looking at a longer distance than the 36.4 that's reflected there from the property line. So if you go on to the next slide, please. You can go on to the next one, please. Okay, this is what you saw earlier. This is after Mr. Diorio modified his floating vessel, removed the 20 inches. You go on to the next, please. So again, talking about the property line distance. So I'd like to just kind of start here with the association is concerned about bringing this marina back into compliance. We did that with the dolphin piles. They were all in violation. Every unit owner received a violation. We accomplished that. This is not to pinpoint any particular unit owner. This is to treat the unit owners fairly and consistently to bring it in compliance. We have two issues here. First issue is, could this be beyond the 30% limitation, which actually doesn't allow for a waiver? And Mr. Diorio is actually back here tonight and actually has told you that it in fact extended beyond the 30%, which should not have gotten a waiver in the first place.
It didn't.
It was recommended to get the waiver.
That issue was not brought in front of this panel, but it came up for the first time in front of the city commission. The city commission did not grant a waiver because of the 30%. We're now back here because he shortened the dock and it's less than 30%. Is his case.
Right. So we're back here today and he's explaining that it's less than 30%. So again, the commission actually requested that survey be done. They wanted to send it back. They said, we're going to hear this at a later date. Please provide the survey so we have some actual numbers to go off of. As Mr. Diorio said, that hasn't been completed yet. He has his objections to why that's not necessary, but that's what the commission requested and it hasn't been completed. So now he's back here and he has to ask this board for a recommendation back to the commission that this floating dock should receive a waiver if in fact it doesn't extend beyond the 30%, should receive a waiver for 9.73 feet beyond the 25-foot limitation. And he must express that there's extraordinary circumstances for granting that waiver, and that should be a recommendation. So if you please pass on to the next slide. So this is the floating vessel platform. And you all know well, I'm sure, because you're boaters, you know that the engine and the skeg off the rear of a boat will extend beyond probably 20 inches off the back. You can see by the picture, the floating vessel platform is well short of the engine and the skeg off the back of the boat. There is the possibility, a good possibility, I haven't done the exact measurements, that if any boat does go on that even modified floating vessel platform, it will likely extend or be right up against the 30%.
That would be the subject matter of code action once you have a vessel.
Every one of those are in violation. Everyone, every
What
boat
about the other
around
five?
is in violation.
But you've been working so hard to bring the marina into compliance.
Very good. Well, I appreciate that. And we have had compliance go out and cite boats. We've had 2 boats cited. And they will cite every boat. They will cite every boat that is beyond the 36 feet. They have every
Basically,
right to do
I
that.
don't think we should be taking any time as to a boat that's not there, that could be there in the future, that might be a violation. Let's take the facts that are in front of us right now, not something that.
Do you
may happen
own
in
a
the
boat?
future.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you have a boat that's on?
No, sir.
No.
We may purchase some kayaks to use the floating vessel project method to launch kayaks.
Thank you. Let's let the attorney finish. So thank you for that.
Okay, if you could go on to the next slide. So here we have a side view of slip 11 right there in the middle on the left picture there. So that's the visual of how far this floating vessel platform extends beyond 25 feet. There's more than just the 30% limitation that we're probably
Is
going.
that before or after he took the cubes out?
That is probably before. So if you think of 20 inches less than that, that's what you're looking at. Question.
So as the attorney, have you guys complained about those 2 boats? Because those are standing out further than his.
Right.
Actually, I see 5 violations.
Well, I mean,
Right.
yeah, the corner is hard to tell, right? But the 2 that are like 1, 2, 3, 2 and 3, those are definitely further than that.
So the slips 1 through 4 actually has more waterway to extend into because it's a longer, like 146 feet. So they actually have from the dock 36 feet, slips 1 through 4. So that
speed is whatever from the dock.
From the dock. So that's like 4 feet beyond the property line.
That's not what we asked, though. We asked for the slips, which are 1, 2, and 3 down from slip 11. The empty one is slip 10 would be 9, 8, 7. He's not asking for slip 1 through 4.
So the board has not taken a position on any boat particularly. The code enforcement has come out, has placed their citations where they see fit. We have not been discriminatory towards particular boats. We want to bring it in compliance. So, you know, if they're too far, they should be cited. We're trying to bring the marina into compliance. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. And so there's a safety issue with this platform extending beyond the 25 feet. There's no reflector that's on the platform that extends there. If there's no boats on either side of that platform like you're seeing it now, what keeps a boat from going down the middle of the river or going down the river at night and not seeing this sticking out beyond the 25 feet that has a reflector? It's dark, it's low to the surface, it blends right in. What is the extraordinary circumstance that we need to subject possible boaters to safety issues? Secondly, who's responsible for that? That's going to go on the unit owner and the association. We need to prevent matters like that. My board is concerned about liability. And if they are aware of violations, they have to bring that before the board, I would bring that before you and object to it. So not only is it potentially going to bump up against the 30% limitation, but now we're asking for 9.73 feet beyond the 25 feet, which was put into the code for a purpose. And we want to bring the marina fully into compliance and request this board not recommend a waiver in this situation.
Can I ask, because I never heard that there was an issue about evening, et cetera. Mr. Diorio, if you were requested to put reflectors on your platform, would you be capable of doing that to make sure that it wasn't hit by a boat coming by at night?
Yes, sir. To be fair to everyone else in the condominium, if you will require a reflector on the bow or the stern of every other boat in the marina, because I could say the exact same thing about a 31-foot boat that sticks out, that doesn't have a reflector on the bow, that someone in the middle of the night could be coming down the channel and run into the boat. So if you require that of all boats within the Hemingway Landing, yes, I will put a reflector.
So I appreciate that, and Kim, I'm not trying to interrupt you, but I assume what's fair for one is fair for everybody else there. Is that correct?
We're trying to treat it fairly, consistently.
So if you have a boat, that's sticking out farther than his floating dock, would that not also be a liability at night?
But
So, so we have a real issue there. I didn't realize that there was a high traffic situation there and we were concerned about liability. So I appreciate you educating us on that. And I'm really trying to understand. So, and again, with all due respect, we have an issue of confirming the width of the canal. We have an issue where we have to confirm whether the property line is indeed at the wet face of the seawall, as Mr. DiOrio says. And now we're concerned also about inadequate reflectors. So we're covering a lot of ground here. So I think they should.
I think I appreciate that. I think the last thing is that it sets a precedent. So there's another floating vessel platform at the marina. If we grant Mr. DiOrio this extension, what keeps the other platform from doing the same, coming back in here and requesting a waiver? This is just going to continue to steamroll and head the wrong direction. We're trying to bring this back into compliance. Everyone needs to play by the rules. And so it just sets a bad precedent for, I think, the marina, for our association, and I think for Fort Lauderdale as a whole. So it's just the extraordinary circumstance when you're not even putting a boat there. I'm just not sure what that is.
Chairman, can I ask a code question? Because if you have called code out to look at this platform, would code enforcement just take it on themselves to look at every boat around to do that? Or would you have to ask code to come out and inspect your home marina? Because if you are looking to get it in compliance, I would imagine that asking them to come out and inspect every boat in your marina to make sure that no one is violating would be the way to do it. Sure. So that if he is in violation, then he does get a certain thing. But if the boat next to him is also in violation, then that boat would have to be removed.
Marco, you got the floor, and you got to help us.
How does that work?
Let me preface,
Real good. Tell me your name.
my name is Marco Aguilera. Let me preface this with, I am no longer in code. I cannot speak on behalf of any cases that are currently going. I did start the case, but I don't know what has happened since then. What I will say is at the time, from what I remember, I only cited for the floating dock and the pilings. I did not.
The pilings as a whole.
Yes.
As a whole for the whole marina.
Correct. Which I guess was already
Right.
dealt with and
That
done.
had been dealt with.
I don't recall citing any individual boats that were sticking out too far. The other officer that was here, Manuel Garcia, he's the officer that took over this now, so it would have been great if we did this earlier. But what I will say, out of my many inspections there, the totality of the circumstances, I would not have recommended Mr. DiOrio to get a waiver if I didn't think that it warranted a waiver. In my personal opinion, it is not at all a navigational hazard. There's plenty of space to go up and down the canal, like I said. Even before he removed the few inches, the boats stick out further than the floating dock does. And again, that's because the boats are allowed to stick out 30%. The dock is allowed to be out 25 feet. So that's why you're seeing boats sticking out further. That is okay. I don't know what they're measuring right there, but that is why you're seeing them stick out further. Again, I don't see it as a navigational hazard. Why I recommended that he get the waiver. What actions have been taken after that, I don't know.
Thank you very much. There's just one thing to clarify on that. Thank you, appreciate it. So the boats in that from slip 5 through 21 cannot extend beyond 36 feet. We have a floating vessel platform, but from what his measurements are saying, at 34.7. We don't even know if that's from the property line or not. Property line, like I said, is within the seawall. So I think that's taken from the seawall. He hasn't done a property. He doesn't know where the property line is. So, you know, it's 36 feet. Those boats, if they're beyond 36 feet, they are in the navigable waterway. They're in violation. And that's against marina. The marina policy is to be within the code. And so, you know, that's what we're trying to enforce here. We need that policed. And if we invite platforms and lifts like this to stay, boats that extend beyond the 30% will occupy them. And that will be a problem for the marina.
Do you have a problem with asking the vessels that are more than 30% into the waterway, telling them to remove those vessels? That's part A. Part B, will you tomorrow turn around and go to code and say, here are these other violations? In treating everyone fairly?
The marina rules say exactly what you said. That there cannot be boats beyond 30%, beyond 36
The
feet.
association's not telling them to move.
They're in violation of the rules. I will have to speak to the board about that. They haven't given me authorization on that point, but I believe that that's what they're trying to police that. They're trying to make sure that happens. And they've asked 2 boats that have actually received the violation. There's citations on 2 boats in the marina right now. They've demanded them to leave, and they have left. So, you know, the rest haven't been cited at this point, and I'm not sure why. If the code enforcement was out there, I mean, they could walk to the marina and do that. I mean,
If I understand your posture is that they know what the rules are, they know that they can't be more than 30%, and you're just gonna passively stand by and let them decide when they're gonna move.
I'm not
You're
saying
not taking any proactive actions.
I'm not. No, I think we took a proactive action
No,
by.
as to the violations that are more than 30% of votes.
No, we told them they have to leave.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've actually both been moved since.
Yeah,
Anybody else? Yes.
yeah, just one question, okay, but the floating dock was previously approved by the condo association, right? Like I said, when you purchased it, it was approved. Okay,
A few boards ago, but
How long had it been there?
they can't approve. They really they illegally approved something. They can't approve something that doesn't.
I
meet the
understand it, but I'm just saying that when Mr. Gloria purchased it, it was approved, it was there.
It was already in
Okay, now, and at some point, you found out your pilings were a little too far out. So you got a waiver, correct? All right. So Mr. Lorio, he said, okay, well, you know, maybe I'm at the 30% or somewhere around there. So he took action to reduce it down. Apparently he's within the 30 foot area. So it looks like he's made the effort to comply. So I don't see that as a navigation issue. I'm a captain. I don't see what the problem is.
Especially the fact that it doesn't have a boat. What's the short kid? I got a question. So the Amelia code says, hey, a mooring device or device attached to the mooring structure is defined here, including boat davits, hoists, boat lifts, and similar items. And then it gets into mooring structures, means dock, marginal dock, seawall mooring, pile finger piers, or some structure attached to the land more or less permanent to which a vessel can be moored. So what is this thing?
Oh, that's
Is it a boat or is it a dock or is it a new type of lift that is out there? And
There's
so,
a statute, it's called a floating vessel platform.
so that's
FVP.
floating vessel platform. Does that mean it's a vessel?
No,
Is it a mooring structure?
it's a structure upon which a vessel could be mounted.
But it's more, it's considered a permanent structure versus temporary, because temporary ones you're able to remove, and a lot of folks got away with sticking in these little docks.
because you remove this considered permanent structure. Yes.
With that 25-foot limitation, which is requesting the 9.73.
Yes.
We as a board have been vocal about the fact that we believe that if you have the right to have your boat there, you have the right to lift it out of the water.
That's correct.
We
And,
actually
and
prefer,
it's not that we're allowing a bigger dock to go out. We're allowing you to lift your boat out of the water. And if this is considered a boat lift, like what we're trying to figure out there too, then that's essentially what we're no different than having it lift.
That's beyond.
If your boat can fit in it and the boat lifts it up and it doesn't go out past the 30%, then we have been
we're very supportive of wanting to get the boats out of the water.
Well, okay, the state statute on floating vessel platforms looks at it a little bit differently. You take the boat in the water, stuff, the environmental stuff can get in the water. You put it up on a lift, the same thing. With this, they treat it differently because they say it's, I don't quite understand all the logic. There were some lobbyists behind it, but it is treated differently than a boat lift. It's given special dispensation.
as in, what is the special dispensation?
It's treated differently than a boat lift. Actually, they have tried to say that it's exempt from municipal regulation.
Right, that's what I had always heard, that it was
Yes.
more exempt than a boat. So,
And quite frankly, I've dug into it and I've talked to attorneys at the Florida Municipal Attorneys Association and a number of attorneys, and I get split opinions. There are opinions on both sides. What I did with Mr. Delorio is we decided if you go for the dock waiver, we don't need to get into litigation on this particular issue. That may happen down the line with somebody else.
right, because
As to a floating vessel platform.
if we were to take it away, then if we were to say no, then there could be litigation saying that this is not considered a lift. Is that what you're trying?
I don't want to go that far down the road at this point. That's just speculative.
Okay.
Any further questions?
From the public,
Appreciate it.
anybody else? I'm sorry, Ken,
No.
I'm gonna make, the public have any questions first? Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yourself, please.
I'm Ellen Bogdanoff. I represent Brian Lilly, who is a unit owner in Hemingway, and I can probably clarify a couple of things. But I have a question first because I guess, if you don't mind, if I call you that, had mentioned that the water was under the bridge, that you all had voted for his waiver, so it was a moot point, and then you said you didn't vote for the waiver. So
No, the commission did not vote on, did not approve the waiver.
did not,
It was approved,
it was approved.
recommended for
Okay,
approval.
okay,
for the-
I just want to clarify.
Sorry, miss, can you say your name again?
Ellen Bogdanoff,
And who are you here representing?
Brian Lilly,
I didn't hear that.
Brian Lilly
He's
is a unit owner. Just to clarify a couple of things, I think you had mentioned, that, lobbyists were up in Tallahassee on platforms, that would be me. So let me.
You were one of those?
So let me explain to you what was happening at the local level is a lot of the jurisdictions were treating the floating platforms as if they were permanent docks and requiring permit. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to be able to just meet within code for whatever you define. And obviously, a lot of the codes had not caught up with these floating platforms. And to make sure that they didn't have to be permitted because they are removable. And
You could probably articulate a little better than I, the environmental advantages that y'all.
correct,
Yeah,
there's a
they-
lot of environmental
yeah.
advantages because it is similar to a lift, but it's not because a lift is permanently attached and this is not. It's just attached to the dock and can be untied.
The reason I mention that is because floating vessel platform statute is stuck away, not where you would expect to find it under chapter 327 for vessels. It's tucked away under some environmental regulations.
So, well, that's just good luck. So,
Y'all did a good job.
So the issue is, Mr. Lilly is not opposed to floating platforms. But what he is part of a group of unit owners who are typically trying to stop the chaos and with everybody kind of doing their own thing, you know, and kind of disrespecting the rules and regulations. So if the floating platform was within the code, he would have no objection. There's a major point that I think I kind of felt like this was a lot simpler than I thought, and that is that it's not one or the other. if you want a waiver, you have to show extenuating circumstances. And I'm not exactly sure, and there was nothing on the record when you all approved, because I went through the minutes and I didn't see anything on the record where you all discussed what those extenuating circumstances were. And just simply, well, I bought a platform that was too big is not extenuating circumstances. You know, when we do variances, you have to show hardship. It can't be self-created, and you have to show a hardship that there's such a unique circumstances here that I have to have this waiver because it's not my fault. And I don't see that here, and that's all you know, and I think it's gonna be the same for the other waiver as well. I don't wanna get into the 120 or not 120. I did send you all the letter, and, when I called the, Marine Industries, they sent me some links. I looked at these links, and there are a lot of realtors out there saying this thing is 110 feet. So I think there is a discrepancy as to what it really is. And I think what Commissioner, I believe it was Commissioner Sorensen asked for was an actual survey, and he wanted to know how it was being measured, not analyzed, how it was being measured. And I guess that would be a boundary survey. But something where a surveyor wasn't just looking at, you know, flat language and analyzing it, but actually going out and measuring it. I think that's a big difference, especially when you're dealing with marine. And we do have a picture, I did send it to Cam as well, where there was a barge coming down, and it was very close to a lot of those boats. So the goal is to have everybody in compliance, not to say, well, those boats are too long, so we're gonna let you keep your platform. So they're gonna say, well, I can have my boat and I can have my boat. The goal is to roll everybody back and say, you need to be in compliance. My firm represents over 4,000 condo associations. It is extremely difficult for lay people who are your neighbors to start wagging their finger at you, telling you you're in violation. It creates a very difficult environment. There have been law after law after law after law trying to get condominiums in control. They've had some challenges. Everybody on the board quit. There was a short period of time where they didn't even have a board. So it's because everybody doesn't want to be contentious with their neighbor. It's very difficult. But they are going to have to be in a position where if they want everybody to be in compliance, they're going to have to keep calling out code enforcement. If we don't get this under control, it's going to be almost impossible to police. And nobody wants to call out code enforcement every day to say, he hasn't moved his boat yet, hasn't moved the boat yet, hasn't moved the boat yet. It's ridiculous. So if we can get everybody in compliance, we're not going to have it. But I think the key factor here is that, honestly, if there wasn't a discussion on what those extenuating circumstances were, and they're not on the record, then I don't know how waiver was approved. So we object, you know, it's not anything to do with an individual. Brian Lilly is very concerned to get all of the violations under control. We bring the marina back to where it needs to be. There's a lot of work that has to be done on that marina, and that we don't keep making exceptions so everybody feels like the rules are something that they don't need to follow. So that's kind of
Questions?
We made an exception for every one of the dock pilings. So there was no extenuating circumstances for those.
Yes, there were. Because the dock pilings, they were told by the engineers, if you remove those dock pilings and put them 2 or 3 feet back where they're supposed to go, they won't stick.
Right.
They won't stick. So there were extenuating circumstances. It was built that way. It was built wrong. And they couldn't move them because the whole thing would have collapsed.
So I have just out of curiosity, for full disclosure, I did go to the site. I spent the morning with Mr. Diorio. I also took the other applicants' slip, etc. And my observation, not only, but these applicants were exceeding the distance that Mr. Diorio spoke that exceeds. He's made it clear he doesn't plan to have a boat, so I do understand an engine can hang off the back of it, but it's not an issue right now. So my question is, somebody owns a beautiful boat there with those triple Mercs on it. Are you gonna ask him to sell that boat?
Move it.
Move it where? He owns the slip.
More it somewhere else.
Okay.
You don't, here's a problem. You don't necessarily, just because you buy something doesn't mean you have the right to violate code.
No,
Meaning the realtors put down, I mean, they go to great lengths to tell you how big the dock is, what the setbacks are, how wide the canal is, so you know as a boat owner. Look, I represent the Yacht Brokers Association for years. Bottom line is when you're a boat owner, you go out and buy a house based on a lot of times where you can moor your boat. And you know that you can't have a 130-foot boat if you're only buying a 100-foot yacht. So, you know, with all due respect, I think a lot of these people just simply took advantage because the board wasn't being aggressive enough. One of the reasons that the board is consistently turned over is they can't get anybody to comply. It's a very frustrating situation.
And he bought the property with that on it, correct?
To my understanding, it came with
It came with the property which the board had approved. Basically, whether it was right or not,
correct.
They-
Look, I think that was something foreign to them. I
would
think
that
what they're
not be extenuating circumstances that you're making him have undue cause after the fact before he knew that was the?
That is for this board. I would argue no.
Okay.
I would say this because bottom line is when you buy a home, you have an obligation to know whether or not that home is compliance with code. That's why you go into look at the inspections. How many people
And you
have
do
looked
code
over?
compliance and anything, you have a title company do that, which was, it was not out of compliance for any,
It was out of compliance, but
it wasn't complained. Nothing was on the books to show. it
nothing was on the record. I
Right.
don't even know if it was licensed, meaning in other words, when those things were pulled up, they were just pulled up. Nobody, it's not like you had to register with the city, right? So, because they were treated differently, there was no permit required. So if there's no permit required, somebody just like, you know, drives it up, floats it, ties it up and walks away. It's like a boat.
So conceivably,
It's like,
when I'm there, you got 21 units that I saw. Conceivably, half of the boats exceed that. So you're gonna tell half the owners who happen to be the majority of the association, they have to move with boats. I give you a lot of credit for that. I
That's,
wish you'd have been.
I'm not the association.
Might
I will tell you, that's the goal of the association. But I think one of the reasons people just kept pulling up boats is simply because everybody saw everybody else violating and they continued to do it. But I think it's admirable for the board to put everybody back in compliance. So everybody's on the even playing field and nobody assumes when you come in, it's the Wild West.
Questions, please. Yes, go ahead.
Isn't Brian building a house, gonna relocate?
I don't know that. I
Is that a yes or a no?
I didn't discuss that with him. I have no idea. I mean, I'm talking to him about this. I have no idea, but I don't know that that's even relevant. I don't even know that that's relevant.
So we're starting to split hairs here. I want to be careful. Let's get it done, please.
Yeah, a couple of comments. Ellen, in your materials, you said something about the extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
I think you're confusing the standards for a variance, and I handled Board of Adjustment for more than a quarter of a century. Those standards are different than extraordinary circumstances under our code. I think that what needs to be done here is the board needs to look at the whole array of waivers that they have recommended approval for. And is this outside those boundaries? Or is it within the boundaries? If you've granted other waivers under similar circumstances for the same amount, and you single this one out for treatment different in kind and degree than the others, I think that's problematic.
Well,
So
I would respectfully disagree. It's
On which
not,
one?
first of all, I understand the definition of extraordinary circumstances, and it's for each individual waiver. And it's not measured against a different waiver because every single waiver has different facts and circumstances that surround it. So if you want to say, well, we've given a lot of waivers in the past, so therefore we have to continue to give waivers, then why even have a code? Just give waivers or just put it into the code. We have a code for a reason and it has to be deliberative. And you guys have to put on the record very specifically what this gentleman has that is extraordinary, that justifies a waiver of the code. The code is the code.
Well,
And
this
you're
board
allowed,
has already recommended granting that.
but you didn't discuss any of what the extraordinary
I
circumstances.
believe it was in the packet. It's in the packet in front of them.
What were they?
I'd have to go back into that packet that was filed back then, but each packet addresses those issues.
Not the what I
Yes.
saw,
Yes, each packet.
it was not, I didn't.
Excuse
wasn't
Each packet on the application goes into what are the extraordinary
The
circumstances.
application that he submitted basically said, we have an extraordinary, wide canal. Therefore, it meets the code. I'm telling you, it's been misunderstood.
You wanna read it?
This is just a summary of what was submitted as extraordinary circumstances.
The applicant cites the floating vessel platform's positive environmental impact derived from the vessel's removal from the water. In addition, the platform serves to reduce potential damage to the watercraft while docked. Those were the.
Environmental concerns are not extraordinary circumstances. Extraordinary circumstances is, I need to give you more. He could shrink that thing and not have to get a waiver. And if he's just putting kayaks on it, he could shrink it and be within code. Extraordinary circumstances, and I read that, that's a misunderstanding of what extraordinary circumstances are. It's not, this is an environmental, that is so extraordinary that you have to let me put an oversized platform in my site. Not extraordinary.
You wrote event for extraordinary circumstances. You described it as events or situations that are beyond the control of the individuals or organizations. Applying that standard, no waiver would ever be, yeah. Yes.
Like we
You said,
discussed,
that's the, I'm reading your words.
we discussed this on a thing because we all have, what my view of that is can be different. The fact that I just want my boat out of the water so a hurricane doesn't screw it up. Or just because we have a 300-foot wide canal and there's no reason I can't put my boat that's 36 feet on a lift.
But you're better off going after changing code. Code is there for a reason.
That's not our
The
board. That's
the
not.
extraordinary circumstances, that's not
I agree with you. I think that needs some rewriting.
absolutely. But extraordinary circumstances would be the piles themselves. Extraordinary circumstances are they were there. It would be astronomically expensive.
Excuse
And
me,
you couldn't plant them there.
you said extraordinary circumstances are events or situations that are beyond the control of the individuals or organization. They authorized those things to be placed there.
No, that was the
Yeah,
developer.
yeah.
That was the
Yeah, that would be a self-created hardship.
No,
if we were in
Bob,
the
you're
Board of
wrong.
Justice.
That was the developer who
How
put
do
it
you
in. You're absolutely wrong.
How do you?
Not the unit,
Because
because that's, they were put in with the developer, with the
So
development.
the builder builds out beyond the setback line. Come on.
But
That's still attributable to the owner.
without beyond his control, he bought it with it on. Like beyond his control, he did not know there was no violation at the current time that he bought it. There was no violation. There was no code against it.
Oh, you talk about it,
I'm saying he bought the property.
It's not extraordinary circumstances because
It's beyond his control. He bought it with the proper thing on it.
it's not.
Why is it? He bought it with it on there. The board had no problem with it for the years that it had sat there before. Whether the board was right or not, there was no active violation through the city on it. And now that there is a violation, he has tried to fix it by bringing it shorter and bringing it in. And I see no issue with that. I mean, if like Bob has said before, that if we go by that strict rule, no one's ever getting a lift in their dock ever, because every lift is the size of your boat or smaller than
I
your
mean,
boat.
you're talking about for this particular,
I'm saying for any canal, anything that a boat would sit out for and not be past 30%, then nobody would be able to put their boat on a lift. Greenland is a perfect one. That's a huge canal. We've let many lifts there. That is what, 250 feet or something like that, huh? 300 feet? That's huge. So to have a 36-foot boat does not violate it, but it's 11 feet past. And the lift of those lifts that they put up there violate past the 20.
So here's
Just
what I,
talking about Mediterranean style dockage versus side two.
But that's a lot of dockage here. Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of it is not though.
Yeah.
When I bought my house in the water, I knew how big a boat I could put behind it. And I didn't bend the rules, right? If I bought a house and a previous owner had done something out of code and it didn't come
You're mainly talking about condo dockage, really.
Yeah, but I'm
Because
talking
all the
about,
condos now.
but think about if you buy a house and a previous owner makes a change that was outside code. If you get cited, you've got to fix that,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
I think, I see this as a similar situation.
Or you go in for a waiver because it's violating something that was there. Like if they put a boat lift up that was just encroaching that 25 feet, then you'd have to go and ask for a waiver for it.
which is what I think he's doing.
Further questions, guys? Anybody from the public? Mr. Dunkel again, I'm sorry.
Okay. I want to speak to the issue of what's been called as a need for a survey to establish the width of the waterway. The property lines for the parcels in question are determined by the recorded plat. And we make reference to recorded property line. And this is determinable by looking at the two plats and determining 120 feet. Further, I would point out, Mr. Delorio mentioned the declaration of condominium. It is some 130 pages in length because they attach Broward County environmental license with regard to putting some additional slips in there. On page 129, it shows that the width of the canal is 120 feet. So I mean,
I'm not arguing that point. I'm just
Okay,
arguing waiver. I'm arguing
Thank you.
waiver.
Well, I'm hearing, I'm sorry, somebody has to help me clarify. I'm hearing that the canal's not 120 feet. You're cool with the canal? You're saying that you
I'm
are?
not going to, no, I'm not going to,
she's not contesting that
capitulate
part.
to the 120
Okay,
feet.
Good. Thank
Even
you.
if it was 120 feet, you still have to have
Extraordinary.
extraordinary
Thank
circumstances to get away.
Thank you.
Allow me just, the 120 feet is the distance between a property line and property line. It doesn't tell you where the property line lies on the
The
property.
plat does.
Okay, and that could be inland of the
No.
seawall.
Yes,
Yes,
yes. And in this case, it appears to be 1 foot
there we go.
on either side. Yeah.
That's exactly my point. So if
But
you're
you're
taking,
talking wet face to wet face, it's
No.
property line to property.
I'm not talking, the property line sits inland of the seawall. So that means.
And our city surveyor
Building
is
inspector
determined,
cannot actually go out 36 feet. It's gotta go 35 or 30, goes one less foot from the seawall. Which is, your property line is within the seawall.
So I'm sorry, so how far do you go out now?
34.73 feet.
He's there.
It's within.
From the property line?
30% From the property line.
And who's
Put up
measured the
slide
property line?
again from the jet dock company that installed it.
Did they measure the property line?
So,
I don't think
Mr.
anyone-
Mr. Dior, Cam, I'm sorry, nobody meant to cut you off, and I'm sorry this is taking this direction. I'm dumbfounded that we can't seem to understand what the width of the canal is, but I'm gonna assume that council is correct and that we do have plats that recommend that this is 20-foot width. We'll have to obviously follow up on that. Extraordinary circumstances are the topic we throw around too frivolously. Bob Dunkel has made it clear we have to better understand what that is, but for right now, it is something that has been dealt with in the past. Mr. Fiore.
Thank you. Nicholas Diorio, applicant. Just in chronological order, I'll address some of the issues raised by Mr. Rogers. Piling waiver, where, pilings were requested for a waiver from the association and approved. It was good for the association, but a waiver within my own slip, not violating my slip, is no good for me in slip 11. Again, selective enforcement by the board. Number two is Mr. Rogers keeps complaining about, we don't know, and maybe it's here. Somewhere they convinced Marco that he issued a violation. We can go to the violation. I can give you the number if someone could look it up on water bill. That Marco issued a violation and I was 36.4 feet beyond the property line. Where did that come from? Did Marco, I don't believe Marco's a Florida surveyor either. So therefore, there should have been no violation. If I can't determine where the property line is, how could Marco determine? Violation should have been voided and withdrawn. If Mr. Rogers wants to pay for and fund a survey for the entire property before any violations, and that's not for me, it's for the other waiver you're going to hear in a few minutes, same issue. If they're claiming we don't know where the property line is, then Marco didn't know where the property line is, and the violation in May should have never been convinced Marco to issue a violation. They should have said, we don't know where the property line is, but wait, we'll wait another 8 months until we fund a survey, and then you can come out again to determine. So that is absolute falsity. believe Mr. Rogers mentioned a survey has not been completed. Plats have been recorded, I believe, in 1935. That was well before Mr. Rogers was born, and the plats were completed and recorded in Broward County Record and will not change unless a new plat supersedes the old plat. If any of you are involved in land use issues, you'll understand that the plat is the determination of the property lines. So there is no issue for canal rule. Mr. Rogers mentioned liability. I believe the purpose of us paying dues is to have insurance policies. The insurance policy covers the directors, covers the owners, covers the marina, and covers the built property of the condos. The purpose of is to have, so coming down and using an example and an ambulance chaser saying that someone can come down and run into your dock. The purpose of having insurance is to protect all of us against those unfortunate conditions. As the previous gentleman from Port Everglades said, 45,000 boats in our area, and you have spent over 2 hours looking at a 34-foot floating vessel. Something's wrong here. There's something going on besides what they want to tell you. There happens to be another floating vessel platform, which Mr. Rogers did not mention, that goes beyond the pilings that he brought in front of you for approval. However, the board never says anything about that gentleman. He must be one of his buddies or something, but I have a photo and I can pass it around the table if you'd like. He extends with a I-beam for a boat lift, plus looks like some type of electronic device. He extends about that far beyond what you approved as the furthest point for a pilot, but you won't hear anything about that violation. Nor will Mr. Rogers ever bring that up. Marco, did they show you that when you were there? No. Gentlemen, I'm sorry I don't know your name, but you had mentioned about the Florida statute, and that was my first offense. Mr. Dunkel can attest to that. When I first found out that I had a violation, I actually contacted the previous owner that put it in, and he said, no, there's a Florida statute that an attorney, 2 different law firms, and fairly reputable law firms in the state.
Gunster is one of them.
Gunster is one, yes. Okay, and they both worked on, along with, I assume, Ms. Bogdanoff, worked on the lobbying for the Florida Senate to get this Florida statute approved. 8.13.413, if I remember correct, Mr. Dunkel would not acknowledge that that related to the floating vessel platform. And unfortunately, he wrote a memo to Mr. Ansbro claiming that he did not feel comfortable litigating because he felt there was less than a 50% chance that the city would win. So therefore recommended that I should come to the Marine Advisory Board along with the same recommendation that Marco made to receive a waiver. I think that addresses most of Mr. Rogers' false comments. Ms. Bogdanoff's comments representing Brian Lilly. She also mentioned about the state statute. And unfortunately, she was incorrect when she said extraordinary circumstances were not presented. Andrew, I don't know if you could quickly bring up, but if you will find my application for November 12th, you will find in my application, there are 4 justifications for extraordinary circumstances. Nothing that you developed, something that I prepared in the application to give you the ammunition to approve a waiver. They are in my application. Whether they get, if my application gets converted to the minutes, I don't know. And if
it's made part of the record.
It's made part of the record. So if her law firm or she failed to disclose, understand and research that, that's not my problem. They were in there and you approved it by a vote of 12-0. Again, Ms. Bogdanoff is questioning the plat. I can use the same logic that I said to Mr. And refuted Mr. Rogers' comments. The plats were recorded in 1935 or whatever date they show, and from all the surveyors and from the city surveyor, they are valid until replaced or superseded by a new plat. And we all know Rio Vista was not recently changed to change the islands in Rio Vista. I took exception to Ms. Bogdanoff's comments. We took advantage of the rules. Absolutely not. And you will see in my application that I presented in my original application to the Marine Advisory Board that I was not taken advantage of. All I did was call the previous owner and he said, we went to the company, we installed the floating vessel platform, and they told us we had to get an environmental permit and permit from the association, an approval from the association. I did both of those items and I presented those to you in my previous application. So to say that I took advantage of the rules is an absolute false statement. Ms. Bogdanoff's claiming you have an obligation to review the justification. If you want to bring up the previous application, you already found and voted on that. The justification of the extraordinary circumstances were listed. Another interesting point, which didn't come up, but I'm surprised it didn't, but today, as we were walking around the property, we ran into one of the neighbors, and he said, you know what we heard? That the city commission is going to cancel the air show because of your dock. I said, what? He said, no. Word is that the city commission, if your dock gets approved, the city commission is going to cancel the air show. I don't know how one relates to the other. And it didn't come up tonight, but this is what the people who are gossiping Hemingway Land. With that, I request your vote and your support for a second time to approve the waiver for the floating vessel platform. Thank you.
So a couple of things, guys. First of all, thank you, Mr. Diorio. So no people can leave. I see Mr. Walker putting on his hat, which usually means he has to. But I say that with great respect because we have.
He's a regular rest
we
period.
can't leave, so we need to be here for the two votes. That's what we got here. Mr. Flanagan has a question. I would like to ask, and I know we're running late, Marco, could you just help us understand? And I know this is your previous life, but you're sitting here, so we're confused. So
By complete coincidence, by the way.
so you were out boating one day and just drove up upon Hemingway.
No, the condo association called code
Oh, yeah.
enforcement and requested that I cite the property for the violations that they then showed me.
Was it just specific to that one slip?
It
or
was that floating dock and the pilings.
the pilot? And how would you have determined how far out he was it to the waterway?
They were able to provide a survey that, again, I am not a professional surveyor, but it had credentials at the bottom from someone who is more credentialed than I. And it had the measurements on there showing that it was out 36 point whatever it was feet. Again, whether it was 36 foot or 26 foot, it doesn't matter. It's over the 25. So that's why the violation was issued for that.
So the violation was based upon, and again, we all really respect what you're doing. I help and appreciate your help here. So you looked at a document that was provided to you. Not sure whether or not that's an accurate document, despite the fact that it had some formal stamp on it. And you made your decision to cite Diorio based on that document.
Well, it wasn't cited that same day. I did revisit the property with the chief zoning administrator for the city of Fort Lauderdale, Bert Ford, who also walked the site with me and who also concurred with what the whatever the survey was. called,
Topographic survey.
Topographic survey, who also concurred with that and also believed it was a violation. So with his confirmation, who is credentially, you know, everything, that is when I issued the violation.
And were you equally as concerned, or was Bird Ford equally concerned with the boats that exceeded way past that dock?
So from what I remember, there wasn't many at the time. It was more towards the west of the property where the canal curves. And the waterway is much wider there. But over toward actually where the actual boat lift was, where the pilings were sticking out the furthest, there wasn't any boats there at the time. I think someone had said that they had already talked to the gentleman and he was trying to move it somewhere to the Keys.
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? So Mark, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how would this case differ from another one for you? Like, how would you make a determination? Let's forget about this issue for a moment, but you're called out to another doctor situation. Do you use your common sense and measure? I mean, so what basis would you do another violation or issue a citation on? Do you use the best facts you have at your fingertips?
It is the best facts at hand. We have different ways of doing that. We do use BCPA aerial photos with a measurement tool with the understanding that it could be off a little bit. But again, we are there inspecting the totality of the circumstances. If it's 6 inches over, chances are I will never be able to, on a boat, be able to figure that out. But we're there to look for violations that are navigational hazards that are over by feet. That's what we're there looking for. We have different ways. We have a laser measure that we can take out on the boat as well and hold it to the side of the island and measure it to the seawall. Obviously, the property line here is not on the seawall. It's a foot back, so that would not have been a good measurement. It is clearly visible that it is over the 25 feet though. Which is what would make it a violation. So the measurement of 36 foot, honestly, is kind of moot because it is clearly over the 25 foot, and that is the violation. How much it's over is not really a factor in the violation.
So you use your best judgment with the tools that you have at hand.
Absolutely.
That's what you did in this situation.
Absolutely. And again, with the little bit of knowledge that I have from the surveys is why I asked the chief zoning administrator to come out with me, who also reviewed the survey and also concurred that I can go ahead and proceed with the violation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board?
Just have one. When he went to the commission, am I understanding right that Commissioner Swartzen asked for a specific thing before it be brought back?
That seemed to be the general gist of the discussion, establish it by survey, but there are other ways to establish it. Looking at the plats, that establishes the property line.
So in
my opinion, you don't really need a survey.
In your opinion, he's met, what I'm getting at is, there's no reason for him to go back if Commissioner Swartzen's like, you didn't meet my ask. Did he meet that ask?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. So that,
but not according to what Commissioner Sorensen said. Legally, I think that what the information that has been gotten is legally sufficient to establish that that the waterway width is 120 feet because the property lines established by the two plats. That's controlling.
Okay. So
back to the board. Planning.
Obviously, all is not well deep. And you get dragged into something again that you hate to see. I think the city giving them the opportunity to get the pilots corrected in a single action rather than individual reflects cooperation. I think the mayor syndicated something that he suggested, we'll cut this back, cut that back, go for a waiver. I can't imagine our focus strictly on waterway safety. And if the canal's 120 feet or the canal 118 feet, whatever, that's 20 inches, Joe. That's minuscule compared to 120. And I would suggest the was the chair to call motions on this application.
Further questions? Bob, did you have?
1 second, is he putting a motion out there?
No.
I guess I would go back to what Commissioner Sorensen asked for. Is if we've not met his request, I mean, I'm sure they had the same discussion and this information was available at the city commission meeting and there was some concern, I guess either through the attorney's office or with the commission themselves, they didn't have enough information. I would hate to put this forward back to the city commission and somebody brought it up and Commissioner Sorensen said, you guys didn't meet my request, my standard for me making a decision on this. So I'd hate to have the applicant go back and forth and it being kicked back again.
That's why this guy is here. To your point, the commission wanted this to be on their next city commission agenda, the second meeting. So I think that it has to come back. And I'll stand tall in the saddle. If there's a problem with the question of survey versus the plats, it's my call. I think as a 40-year practitioner of real property, then I'll go with plat lines establishing the property lines.
So why wasn't that discussion had at the city commission meeting? That same firmness?
At that time, we were thinking in terms of a survey, but then we realized there's another way of doing it, which is not gonna take as much. Look, this is over Christmas. How quickly can you get surveys? Yeah, and that was a concern.
And to be honest, he was 4 inches over, right? You were at 36.4, so technically,
Yeah.
he was in violation of being in the tip water.
The 30, yes.
30% water.
Yes.
So
So it was like, bring back information that establishes that you've shortened the dock and you're no longer in violation of the 30% property line to property line. Or I think Cam has something to say.
Cam, please. So property line to property line, we measured that 36 feet from the Hemingway property line. Is that correct?
That's the way the code, yes, the code is written from the property line.
So it really doesn't matter. I mean, it matters how wide the canal is for 120 feet, determine the 36 feet. But
Yes.
when you're actually measuring how far that vessel, floating platform vessel extends, needs to come from that property.
Agreed.
Okay, so it's not the measurement of the whole width, it's if we all agree 120.
But you have to take the entire width of the waterway into account to establish where is the 30% measured from the property.
And that's
So
fine.
there's an interplay between the two, yes.
It will determine if it gets you to the 120 feet by determining the plat. It will not get you the actual distance that floating platform extends beyond the property line, which is what the commission wants.
Yes, Mr. Diorio.
I'd like to address that issue and, I would think that if the board took such a position and we're going to be pointing to here and here to here to instruct Marco to issue violations, they should have had their ducks in a row and know where the property line is. Not bring it up, here we are, May 9th of 2024, so we're coming up on 9 or 10 months, and they still don't know where the property line is, and they're expecting me, who received the violation, to establish through a costly survey where the property line is. Let them do it and hold all violations until they know, then they can use that line and violate every boat that extends beyond 36 feet from an imaginary property line, which their attorney won't even acknowledge that they know where it is now. Like, that is totally absurd.
At the end of the day, it's my opinion that this board has a responsibility to either recommend approval or denial, because the commission wants this back on the next agenda. If you recommend denial, it will still end up going to the commission because that recommendation for denial is not binding on the commission. So in other words, deferring to a later date is not an action that's available to us.
But we are proving anybody can put a 36-foot floating vessel structure there.
Measured
to pick up from that property line. So every one of those pylon things at 5 feet doesn't mean anything anymore. You can go to the 30 with a floating vessel platform.
Yes.
Along that whole canal. Okay. If you get the waiver. So you need a waiver for your boats. So all the boats that go over the 25 feet.
Well, no, maybe. Oh, the boats that extend beyond.
What's that?
Maybe they apply for.
No, but they get the waiver.
No, Okay, for a vessel that extends more than 30% of the width of the canal, you can't get a waiver.
Can't get a waiver, yeah, right.
And I say there's no waivers for boats anyhow.
Yeah, that's under chapter 8.
Right, so we're sitting here though saying this platform that sticks up that far is, once that everybody all around there says, hey, fine, I'll get one of those too.
You'd have to get a waiver.
They have to come in front.
They gotta get one waiver, so okay, if one guy gets it, the rest don't, but anyway, yeah, okay.
Anybody else? Mr. Flanagan has made a recommendation that we approve the waiver. Do you want to make a formal? Would you like to see it? So we have a, request to, have a vote on approval of this waiver. May I have a motion to approve, please? Anybody? A second from anybody? Second. Mr. Flanagan, would you bring it to a roll call vote, please?
Yes, sir. Let's begin. Mr. Flanagan.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Swindell.
No.
Oh, Ms. Wara. Ms. Wara.
What is this thing? This is my first one.
You have to vote.
So they're both,
I have to vote?
yeah,
You have to
yeah,
vote.
they need you for the quorum.
Yes.
Mr. Brunel,
Yes.
Mr. Franks,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
No.
Vice Chair Harrison.
He's gone.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Chair Whit.
Approved, yes.
You have 6-2.
So thank you all.
Does that mean your motion?
Carries. We're missing, are we okay? Is that- Yeah, it does. I want Andrews to just count this guy. Yeah.
Six,
Two, makes it eight.
Just be out there.
Can I borrow your calculator, Bill?
So, guys, first of all, let's bring it to order here.
Alex, and the second was.
Ellen, Camp, thank you, Aria, thank you. Let me, this obviously makes its way to the city commission. Safe to say, there's a lot of folks interested in opposition, in support, et cetera. The city commission is where we're gonna have to take it up. I strongly recommend the board be there to support our recommendation, and we'll follow up with that. I appreciate everybody's patience, and we will now move on to the next document. And that's Adrian. So we now have a similar dock waiver. Well, I won't call it similar. Are you leaving, Marco?
I am.
Thank you. I get out. Thank you. We won't let anybody else go. So, folks, this is a second waiver at the same Hemingway condominium. And in this case, we have, this is on behalf of Adrian and Natalia Walke. This is on slip 21. In previous slides, we saw the slip. There's an existing boat lift, and I'm gonna let council take over and please. Thank you very much.
We want to find the right PowerPoint.
Scott,
It's just the regular package I sent. The rest was just extra. Okay. Sorry. Good evening, members of the board. Seth Holton, K-O-L-T-O-N.
Okay.
On behalf of Adrian and Natalie Walkley,
I apologize, sir. Can you spell your last name again?
K-O-L-T-O-N.
Thank you.
And I have to correct Mr. Dunkel about the opinions of attorneys. When you have two attorneys, typically you have three opinions.
It's interesting because I just related to a couple of city workers that in a small town with one attorney, they'll starve. Two attorneys, they'll flourish.
Exactly. And I don't know who is getting paid $500 or $1,000 an hour here this evening who's an attorney, but it's not me. I'll try being. And thank you for your service. And I appreciate the board. I'll try and be brief because a lot of the issues that I need to address have really been questioned. I know this is a separate application and it's getting late into the evening. The Walkleys are an owner in the Hemingway Landing condominium. They're members of the association. They own Slip 21 at the marina, which is on the Saragordo River, same river that we've been talking about for the last hour and a half or so. They did apply for and were approved to install a lift in their particular slip, both by the association and I believe through the city of Fort Lauderdale. The Marine Advisory Board previously recommended a waiver for Hemingway Landings Association relating to obtaining, related to dolphin or mooring pilings that extended beyond the 25 feet, which was the allowable distance without a waiver. We've talked a lot about that, right? So previously, the association's position is we need a waiver. That waiver was approved by the city commission. The ordinance was approved November 7, 2024. They approved the waiver that brought 22 separate pilings into compliance. And I'd ask if you could slide 6 of the package that Mr. Walkley submitted, and you'll see that the 2 pilings at issue. If it's there, if not, it's not a big deal. Not the objection, I can tell you that. Do you know which file it is, Adrian? That's all right. We've seen enough graphical representations and images. You can see all the pilings, you know what they look like. And again, I can't emphasize enough, the association on behalf of all of the unit owners submitted that application for waiver on behalf of all of the dolphin mooring pilings that were not in compliance. Okay. And it's really important to keep that in mind as we go forward. The association advocated for a waiver for these pilings for a number of reasons. And the most important of that included the structural integrity of the pilings if they needed to be relocated. And you heard tonight from Ms. Bogdanoff that that is an extraordinary circumstance, okay? And it's important to keep that in mind because that is the same extraordinary circumstance that relates back to Mr. Walkley. The Walkleys were subsequently received a violation because their lift exceeded the 25-foot distance. And it's interesting because I do believe, and I don't really think it's appropriate for the board to be too concerned with this, but there is an issue with selective enforcement going on at this condominium association because we are seeing violations only to a select few people, including Mr. Walkley. In any event, code enforcement was out there, and on top of the pilings, you will see the mechanical portions of his lift. And because the only thing that was approved were the dolphin pilings and not the mechanical portions of the lift that sit directly on top of those pilings, Mr. Walkley had to come here now seeking a waiver. And to be very clear, I can't emphasize this point enough, and I wish I had that picture. When you look at, and it may be in the materials you already received, when you look at those mechanical pieces, they literally do not extend beyond the pilings. So in effect, what we are asking for here tonight by way of a waiver is simply to approve what has already been approved, which is to say the dolphin pilings, with the understanding that the mechanical pieces weren't previously given a waiver. As you can see from the application, they have satisfied all the requirements for you tonight to recommend a waiver to the City Commission. It's important to understand that granting this waiver would not create any greater encroachment on the navigable waters than what already exists. Again, we are not here asking you to do something that you have not already done. And certainly the Walkleys are in agreement that they will comply with all other aspects of the law if the waiver is granted, including whatever applicable building and zoning regulations there are, including the fact that if they have a boat that is docked or on their lift, it has to be within the required 36 feet from the property line. I don't want to run down that rabbit trail. I think we spent enough time on that. And by the way, part of the violation that the Walkleys got did relate to a boat that extended beyond the 36 feet from the property line. That's been corrected. There's no boat there right now. I understand that the association through Mr. Rogers and Mr. Lilly through Ms. Bogdanoff are going to be objecting. You've received those objections. I want to address them head on. The association is claiming that the boat lift creates a different type of encroachment in the navigable waterway. that defies logic because the boat lift itself does not extend beyond where the pilings are. So there's really no way to claim that it creates any other type of encroachment than what already exists. And the same structural issues that related to the necessity of pilings relate to the lift. In other words, if you can't move the pilings because of issues with structural integrity, you can't move the lift for the same reasons, because if you're going to move the lift to put it within whatever arbitrary determination the association thinks it's supposed to be, you got to move the pilings. There's also a contention about the width of the slips, and I want to be very clear, that is not an issue for this board. That is an issue for the association. That should not even come into consideration. The association is within its right to address that when the time comes. I understand that Mr. Lilly through Ms. Bogdanoff is going to be addressing issues relating to the Walkleys moving, selling their unit, renting their unit. Those are not issues for this board to consider either. Whatever disposition of that property is or is not going to happen is absolutely irrelevant. The waiver that they're requesting addresses very specific issues. Should the pilings that have already been granted a waiver be allowed to remain? Whether they build another home, whether they rent their unit, has nothing to do with it. We've heard a lot about watercraft encroachment. Again, that's an issue for code enforcement. Frankly, if the association wants to bring everybody into compliance, they should be making sure that they are keeping everybody in compliance. The pictures that we've seen over and over and over again show boats that extend way out into the navigable waters. The last point that I wanted to address was the safety hazard point. And as strange as it sounds, if there were a safety issue, I'm pretty certain you would hear statistical data from either the association or Mr. Lilly about accidents on the canal. We've heard nothing about boats crashing into any of the boats or anyone crashing into any of the boats that are docked near Hemingway Landings. There's no evidence before this board that there have been accidents, incidents, or anything else. And that bit of margin that perhaps there was for one boat passing through made it through safely. All right. So if there were an issue with safety, I'm pretty sure code enforcement would be on top of it. I'm sure the association would be on top of it since they're so concerned about potential exposure. And the last issue I wanted to address that I think is a concern of Mr. Lilly's is the view. And again, we're not here to address view. That's not something for the Marine Advisory Board to address. So I've tried to truncate this down as much as I can because it's late in the evening and I think we all want to get out of here, but I'm respectfully requesting that based on the information and the application before the board, you approve or recommend to the city that they approve the waiver that the Walkleys are requesting. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Seth.
That is one of the photos, yes. Thank you.
Again, for purpose of disclosure, I visited the site. I did speak with Adrian. I did again take photos of it and confirm that the change that Seth is referring to is the motors were added to the top of the pilings, obviously, to control the difference. That's the only substantive change I'm assuming anybody was aware of. Anybody have questions on the board, please?
So these lift pilings are pilings that we approved because for the whole association, that's part. Was that lift on there prior? It was.
It was.
What's the deal with the motors? Like,
Been
were
there
they-
4 years.
Was the motors replaced?
No, they've been there all along. This was, my understanding is this was just a separate issue because.
But they stick out
Nope. they don't.
exactly the same as the.
It's what you used to see on a four post.
Yeah, just. Okay.
And is this your first violation in 4 years? It's in there.
So this all came about because neighbors complaining about this view out this unit. So the boat was on there for 3 years, no problems. This started about a year ago. And they're using the city basically to enforce, to try to make me move the lift because he doesn't like it in front of his unit.
So.
Excuse me, for the record, your name
Adrian Walkley.
and the applicant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what was your violation then? If the pilings were actually already approved What did you get cited for? What is the code?
Because it was a waiver for the pilings and not for the structure. So even though it's just the I-beam on top of the piling, I need a
Are you saying like this?
structure.
We're talking.
Yeah, let me try to put that in, excuse me. Let me try to put that in proper perspective. I was approached several months ago by former Commissioner Rodney Rogers, Cam's dad. We got this problem, we've got all these pilings that are out there beyond 25 feet. And it looked like we were gonna be doing 19 or 21 separate applications for waivers. Whoa, let's slow down. Do we really want to do that? Why don't we work on having the individual slip owners assign to the association the right to apply for a waiver for the pilots? That did not include his boat lift or anything else. So that's how we got to where we are. So the waiver was granted as to the pilings, but not as to the boat lift. So now we're going after a waiver as to the boat lift.
Okay. But so I think part of the question here, Bob, is it safe to say that the boat lift does not exceed the current dimensions of the slip? Am I correct? It's not.
That's not an issue here. That's not an issue in front of this. board. Thank you.
Anybody else?
But they don't, the motors do not stick out past the pilot. What?
Correct, and
Because I can't see on this picture.
yeah, I
really.
apologize.
It's kind of
There's
blurry.
this- Well, maybe we can try and get that slide up. I don't know if.
I mean.
I think you have a motor.
Sure.
That's yeah, that sticks out. No forward. 20 miles an hour. Yeah, 19,000 gallon. Okay, but one more. I'm sorry.
Guys,
The
I'm
other
happy to
one's got
show you, Mr. Walker. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was there, again, you can take a look at my phone, and I'm not, I don't have a position here other than what's fair. The fact is you have a boat lift now that sits in the slip, typical I-beams, typical four-post lift with a couple motors and pulleys and
And look at the two pilings with the wave that's sitting on top of.
Further question?
Yes. What was the waiver for the pilings? How far out beyond 25 feet were the pilings?
They were all here, they were on that.
So I can tell you that the two pilings that issue here, which are, I believe, X and Y, were granted, waivers totaling 2.1 feet, extending them out to a total of 27. That was what was in the resolution that were passed by this. Actually, did I misspeak? I'm sorry.
Board members, please pay attention to this. Actually, we have the numbers that you just recited are not based on the property line.
Okay.
They're based on the topographic survey supplied by the association, which is really measured by wet face. It seems a little incongruous to be coming and complaining now, talking about property line, when this resolution that was granted was based on wet face. I hope we don't want to have to go back in front of the panel to rescind that resolution that was passed.
Which means every one of these are further out.
Good.
Because they have them from basically 6 inches to 2.7 is what all of them were wrong. 6 inches to 2 feet, 7 inches, right? So now you're saying that was wet face and it.
I think there's about a 1 foot difference.
So we're another foot on every one of those pilings.
Further question? Anybody else? Anybody else would like to speak, please? Am, come on up.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Andre, you might bring up the slide again. The second part of the presentation, if you go to.
thank you all for this, for your willingness to stick around. Appreciate it.
Past his bedtime.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
You go to the Mr. Welch's. There we go. Okay, thank you. Thank you again. I'm Cam Rogers on behalf of the board, the Hemingway Association Board. Just to reiterate, the board is here for purpose of bringing all the marina into compliance. We pursued a waiver for all the pilings because there was the issue of the pilings being cited, every single unit owner was cited, okay? So we had to bring those minimal from anywhere from 6 inches to really, it wasn't more than 2 feet until we got to the actual pilings that were associated with these lifts. But 6 inches to 2 feet. And that was going to be a problem with the actual stability of the pilings if we were to remove those. So that's why the board did that on behalf of every unit, associated unit. The waiver that's being requested is actually for a waiver beyond 25 feet. So although the piling has been approved, we're still, the actual mooring structure is about 2.8 inches or so beyond the 25 feet. And that's the amount of space you're looking at there. If you go to the next slide, please. So the left slide here, the left picture actually reflects another 2 lifts. Both of those lifts are under violation. Slip 21 is the one in the distance with the actual boat that has received a violation for being beyond the 30% rule. So these lifts, and particularly slip 21, was built pursuant to an approval from the board, but the board did not approve a lift to be built beyond the code limitations. The board can't do that. Board didn't do that. So the actual lift was built beyond the 25 feet, which was the code's limitations. So we have a lift that was not really approved. If you go to the next slide, please. Here you see, and if you can look closely, the actual lift structure does extend beyond the piling. I believe that Mr. Volchi actually said it in his request for waiver that it exceeded, by some distance beyond the actual piling. So it's not exactly on the piling. It goes beyond the piling. This lift is built for a boat of this size. So if we keep going on with this waiver, we're going to keep on having boats to this size, filling this slip, and therefore being beyond the 30% rule, which is in violation.
Time out. This is here for the lift. If a boat is put on there at some later point in time, that's something separate and apart from the application for this waiver. That should not be a factor for the board to consider.
And have you not said that he was violated for that and he moved the boat?
He has moved the boat.
Okay, so that boat's not there.
Currently is not there.
That lift is empty.
As far as I know, it is empty.
So
the other thing is it sets a terrible precedent. Probably in a month or two, or whenever the board meets next, you'll have another request for waiver, slip 19. That one sticks out even further. Are we going to continue this steamroll? Let's just continue the waiver. Mine's close enough. Let's let it get by and approved for the city commission to accept the waiver. This just has to stop. The board has an interest in bringing fair, consistent enforcement on the code, which actually says a mooring structure should not extend beyond the 25 feet.
But the board has an obligation to consider any application for a waiver based on the facts and the merits of that case. So,
The board, I'm sorry, the Hemingway board.
no, I'm sorry, this board,
The condominium board. Condominium board has an interest in a fair and consistent enforcement of the code. Here we have another example that's going to continue to extend, and that one clearly extends, it's a foot and a half or so beyond the pilings, and it's wider. So, this has to stop. Where does it stop? There's gotta be extraordinary circumstances determined by this board to allow for these waivers to actually be recommended to the city commission. Because we'll never accomplish our goal as a marina, and everyone's gonna be pointing fingers at the other person, and someone's gonna call in a violation, and it's not good for the congruency and harmony of the actual association members.
This lift has been here for 4 years, right? Okay, so when this lift was put in, it was not wavered because it was considered that it was in the 25 feet.
That is
Did
correct.
this because
That
of
is
these,
correct.
because these pilings were considered to be at 25, not in a violation that it was.
It
So-
was not put in at 25 feet. They stick out.
No, I'm saying, that
Everybody
I'm
thought it
saying
was
that
at the time. and
the
then
thought
they
process
found
was
out
that
that
all
was
of these pilings were meeting code, but
Well,
they were not.
no,
So-
this is not even, these pilings for these lifts are not even within the scope of the other pilings along the marina. They stick out well beyond. You can see that, they're foot and a half, 2 feet beyond the actual other pilings. So these were modified from the original development of that marina.
I have to object to that. I apologize. There's no evidence that those were anything other than the original developer installed pilings. And they are consistent.
And those were the facts that were brought to me when this was first.
Absolutely.
What pilings are these by alphabetical?
I'm sorry?
You have them labeled in your brought to us by piling W, X, Y, Z. Like, do you know which numbers these are?
I believe they're
These would be the last, they'd be the last.
X and Y.
So they are 2.1 and 1.1.
Well,
And then
2.1 and 2.1.
No, 2.1, both of them.
X and Y, I'm sorry, X, Y was the okay. So they are not the ones that, so what is U and V? Is that 19?
I'm not sure exactly, but
Because that's the
if
ones that
they're-
are
if
sticking
they're
out the
both-
furthest.
If they're both, yeah. That's exactly right. So these were installed after the fact. I think you have Mr. Welching, they say that these were not the original piles that they just put lifts on. Is that correct?
Same issue. The lift was installed, got a permit, so those piles went in with the lift.
Piles went in with the lift, not the original development. Piles were,
We got the building permit, they came in, they installed the lift, closed the permit, and then 2 years later, 3 years later.
I stand
said it
corrected.
was out of bounds.
So the inspector that inspected that permit to close the permit failed.
Yes,
I believe
there was no survey required at that time for any boat lifts that were installed.
But the pilings would have had to have it.
there's
a
one
code.
boat lift where I believe an engineer certified it. And that's acceptable under the process, but I don't believe that's this one. Yeah.
But the pilings would have had to been code compliant, right? Because they would have had to made sure that they were at 25 and
I
not.
don't know where, I honestly don't know where that mistake was made in terms of it not being at 25 when it was represented.
Maybe they just looked at all the other pilings and kind of eyeballed it because every piling in there was wrong.
in order to put in the lift that size, you had to extend the pilings. So they had to put in new pilings. You can see on slip 19, you can see the old piling that's about, if you look at the picture there, slip 19, you can see the old piling just inside the piling furthest on the slip 19 lift. That was the original piling. They just kept it there. They didn't want to remove it. So they had to put in a new piling about 1.5 feet, 2 feet further out. So
They catch this 3 or 4 years ago.
it was the prior board that approved it, and they didn't go out and I guess check whether or not the actual it was installed the way that pursuant to what the permit stated. So
I have a question for Adrian. I'm a little bit confused. Your slip number 21.
Yep.
Those are the pilings that were originally approved, and under this. They're not new pilings.
No, they were approved under the waiver.
Yeah, but are these pilings different than the pilings that were initially installed years ago?
Yeah, I mean, they were new pilings. When they were put in 4 years ago, they were new pilings.
Okay.
So I would say that this is my opinion. You guys came to this board to approve all these pilings. You should have singled those two pilings out so that they were installed without us and that they should not be approved. Conclude of the rest of the pilings. And that's in my, that's just me. Because it seems like you guys want all these pilings, but now you want all these guys to take all their lifts off.
So just to give you a little background on that, every single unit owner was cited for these pilings. It wasn't particularized.
Yeah, but you said you brought the code out, the condo association brought the code out to cite all the pilings, correct?
The original intent was to do some work on the marina.
Right, but the
And
condo,
when
you said the condo association asked code to come out and cite all the pilings
When it was
to establish that they were breaking the code, correct?
when it was brought before Bert Ford in a discussion, he identified that all these pilings that were likely out of alignment.
Right.
They were extended beyond the 25 feet. Every single unit owner was cited, so we had to clear all in order to get a site off of all the unit owners.
Correct.
If you only cleared a
In my
majority
opinion,
of them,
you just cleared all the boats. That's my opinion. You cleared all the boat lifts because they're attached to that piling.
but they
I mean-
extend beyond the piling that was actually approved.
In my initial discussions with Bronzy, we decided to go for one application covering everything. He kept bringing the point out, we don't want that to include the boat lifts. They had some arguments that some of the boat lifts were wider than what they should have been, which frankly is not an issue for this board, but they wanted to tackle that later, and that's what's happening now.
Right, it's totally what I'm getting. Is that now that they've approved themselves, they're trying to get rid of the boat lifts.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm getting.
It's up to this board to make that approval, right? Are we just gonna let everything go by? That's the question. Clearly, we have a distinguishment and it's going to come before you, soon. This other lift here extends even further beyond. Okay,
That's a
so
different case.
so are we?
We're not here on 21, we're here on
19.
19.
I'm just saying, it sets a bad precedent. The next one's gonna come in and say, how about me? Me too. It's gonna keep on happening, okay? So terrible precedents. The board is trying to bring it into compliance with the code. In order to waive the code, there has to be extraordinary circumstances. I'm not sure what the extraordinary circumstance is here. Doesn't seem extraordinary to me.
I would say that it's been there for 4 years and then you guys have approved that and now that's extraordinary to make him pay $20,000 to at least for a new lift and possibly have to move the pilings back.
This
change
board has said that money is not an extraordinary circumstance before.
I've never said that.
I must.
So I hate to touch that.
Yeah,
I think we have patience.
I would agree with what you just talked about. If the board moved and approved all the pilings, then I don't see what the problem.
Because the same way, how do you expect him to shorten his lift to make it a smaller lift? If he can't move those pilings, which is what you guys came for us to move them back 2 feet, to make it a smaller lift.
I'm not an engineer, but
Well, I mean, you guys can't, that was the argument that you guys came to us about. So why would we do that to him now? Because he has to move it back 2 feet or 1.5 feet or whatever to meet the rest of the pilings? Like that's the same concept, right? I mean,
I'm saying bring it into compliance with what the code says. That's
And
what
by
the board's
granting,
doing.
that would be bringing it into compliance.
And a waiver of all.
Exactly.
Okay.
Cool.
Anything else?
Nothing further.
Ellen?
Thank you.
If I don't get it late, I'll try to be quick. First of all, I want to clarify that Brian Lilly posed their application to approve, and Bob knows this, to approve all of the pilings for exactly this reason. Because he knew it was going to be a waterfall effect where you start approving all of these pilings, everything else is gonna be approved. So that was his concern, and I stood up at the commission and I told them that we do not approve of the waiver on all of the pilings.
So what was his stance then? Just curiosity to get rid of all the pilings and let it go for a couple of years until they can put them back down?
Well, the goal was for the association, they were redoing the entire marina. That's how this all started. They were redoing the entire marina when they found out that the pilings, when they brought the discussion to the city, oh, your pilings are out of compliance. So you need to go for a waiver. But Brian knew that this was going to happen and that everything was going to be approved. And I know that it's, we're supposed to stay within the waiver request that's here now, but I kind of noticed that other facts seem to kind of eke into everybody's judgment. I know this gentleman is concerned that Brian was selling his unit. I know that I saw somebody's facial reaction when they talked about it was blocking his view. I think what is important to know is that the declaration of this condominium association prohibited lifts. A board inappropriately approved those lifts. They changed the rules and regulations. In a condominium association, the declaration rules. It was an error. So when you want to
They
talk.
do that until it changes, right? Until they have a vote? Did they have a vote to change that?
They changed it back. No lifts.
No lifts anymore.
No lifts. Now you can't unring the bell.
So can I go back to what your concept of this is just gonna keep going? It's not. What lifts are there are gonna get probably wavered and no new lifts are gonna be put up.
That wasn't my argument.
Well, that was.
I just,
Right, I mean,
what I'm saying to you is, and quite frankly, one of the reasons that they put this in the declaration is because they wanted everybody to have quality of life and to be able to view the water. And at the end of the day, you can think it's not a big deal, but yes, this 35-foot boat was blocking his view, which is why he bought that unit. And that's why he bought it, knowing the declaration said no boat lifts. So when you look at this, the extraordinary circumstances, they want the boat lift removed because it was built for a 35-foot boat. It was built specifically for a 35-foot boat, knowing that that boat would violate city code. And at the end of the day, I don't know why we keep rewarding, when people just kind of violate the rules and take their chance and hope that, they're going to ask for forgiveness instead of for permission. And that lift was not built to the plans from my understanding. It was I don't know who screwed it up, but whoever installed it improperly. So what we're asking is, what are the extraordinary circumstances to make them keep it? I would ask you not to use the approval because Brian objected to it specifically because he knew this was going to be a reaction like, okay, we're going to just keep on giving these approvals all the way through.
That's already approved. It's already approved by the commission.
I understand.
It's here in the
But it
document.
shouldn't be relevant. It shouldn't be relevant for this because that doesn't make it extraordinary circumstances. If it violates, it doesn't belong there. He can fix it, reinstall it to code and make sure that it doesn't, or remove it.
With all due
That's what you're
respect, your board cannot go one way and then change their mind 4 years later and take away from all those.
Particularly where
It
there's
can't-
been
and
substantial.
that's not our business. That's not our business to do that. And it seems like you're encroaching us to make us decide this stuff. And your board, whether they were wrong or right, if they allowed people to do that for 4 years, they can't come to us now and say, hey, we've done this and now we're going to take away. Because to me, he's had it for 4 years. That's exterminating circumstances that you now have approved those pilings to make him change it and make it smaller.
So, but keep
It's
in
not
mind,
possible.
the issue of the pilings, they want uniform application, uniform benefit to all. Uniform benefit to all is every single unit will have benefited from that variance. That Brian opposed, but they benefited from it. Okay, this is one individual who has a boat lift that's in violation, and I know the city code will tell you, I don't care if it's there, 10 years, 15 years, they'll fix it. Money can't be the issue. Otherwise, everybody is not going to pay attention. They're just going to ask for forgiveness and not ask for permission. That's what I would do. I'd come to the city of Fort Lauderdale, build what I want, ask for forgiveness, not ask for permission, because you can get a waiver. It's not extraordinary. I don't see it as extraordinary circumstances because you can remove it. You put it in, you can remove it. And it works with the spirit of what the declaration was, what this association.
So would the association be okay with him taking it out and put a smaller one in?
As long as it meets code,
But I thought you said no boatless.
they have to let him do that. I think they have to let him do that. And I don't know, and I would defer to the association attorney on that.
Right, because.
If they gave him permission, you can't unring that bell.
In your hypothetical.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
He can move it. It's not a matter of getting it smaller. He has to move it. He was given permission to put up the boat lift. He has to move it.
Association pay for that?
It's not for me to decide. I'm not the association attorney. I don't represent the association.
Sorry, Mr. McGarris, guys. Any further questions from the board? Any further questions from the public? Yeah, can anybody else?
But I would ask that the record from the prior case be included in the record of this with regard to the discussion of property lines, so on and so forth.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, sir, if you mentioned the previous dock waiver
Yes,
discussion, thank you.
yes.
Where do we stand, guys?
I'd like to say, so they argued,
Stand up, Adrian.
they argued that the pilings couldn't be moved back because of structural. You can't move a piling a foot. They want me to move back the piling a foot for pilings that they got waivers on because they were out too far. So how do they expect me to do that? And this was built with permits, closed out by the city. I mean, I did everything by the book. So, I mean,
Thank you. But, what Adrian's referring to is he simply, as you know, cannot pull a piling out and drop it back a foot. Mr. Washington can attest to that. It's a bit more complicated. Any further questions? Do I have a recommendation from anybody? Anybody make a motion? Motion, please. I'm sorry.
A motion approved.
Second, anybody? We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second from somebody? Mr. Franks, we have a second, and we have a roll call vote, please.
Sir,
We have a request to approve the waiver.
Hang on. Yeah, I don't have a question, but the board should have an opportunity to discuss, right? Instead of moving right into a vote.
That's why I
Once the
asked
motion's
for
on the
a
floor, there is, then it's open for discussion.
Okay, but we just called for a vote, but I'm saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I
I'm
didn't-
sorry. I
misunderstood.
asked you to refer the.
Not a question. Discussion now,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So there's a distinction there. I just, this is why we'll never live in a condominium. So thank you all for briefing. for me.
Spice my dad, you
Made a lot of
All associations, not just condominiums.
It's a challenge for, a building of 21 different unique owners to have consistent rules and across the board. And the new piece of information where lifts were not allowed, then they were allowed for a little while, and now they're not allowed again. I mean, it's amazing to me that you can make those kind of significant changes and that meets the spirit of the law. I just think it's a challenge we're being brought into to try to fix this, but I also give the condominium some credit for trying to fix it and make the marina within code and trying to be consistent across the board. And I feel very bad for the applicant that's got the lift in place and can't move pilings because we've already had that discussion. So I think it's a real challenge. This is a tough one for me to come down on, but I do admire the condominium taking the higher road and trying to get the entire marina into conformity with what the city's regulations are.
Somebody else.
So, but every unit owner can apply for his own slip waiver or whatever, no matter what. Unless the condo guys are stepping up saying like, it's against our, whatever.
Did it for the big pilings, and maybe they would help do it for these, I don't know.
Getting into compliance is a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can turn around and go, all right, move all the pilings back 4 feet, no boats can stick out behind 24 feet.
Yeah.
Go.
Navigation.
There you go.
It's not a P.
Right.
At all.
Yeah, came in for a waiver.
Any further discussion? What Mr. Flanagan just said is that one of the important things to us is that this is not, there is no impedance to navigation as far as we're concerned. We're able to maintain that 40% channel, so thank you for that. Any further discussion? Let's bring it to a vote.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Franks,
Yes.
Mr. Brunel,
Yes.
Ms. Fuera,
Yes.
Mr. Swindell, sorry. Mr. Flanagan,
Yes.
Chair Whitten.
Yes.
7-1. vote.
Thank you all very much. Thank you to everybody participating. I know this was not an easy evening for anyone. This will continue at the city commission. Ellen, Cam, I appreciate your efforts. Tough one for all of us around. So thank you again. No doubt we will see you all at the city commission meeting with this, and thank everybody for their help on this. That brings us to old new business, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm looking at my watch and I thought it was 8:30, it's 9:30, so, I've got a lot to cover, but I'm gonna call it, unless anybody else, I'm gonna call it, particularly because Mr. Walker has to have, them, which is usually a fine. So, yes, I'm sorry, Mr.
I forget that.
Wait.
Well, hold on.
Oh, you have something to say.
Unrelated to my request for waiver, yes, I share Mr. Swindell's concern that the city commission may make a deal about the survey. And I would like to just publicly announce that if your original approval for the files for the approval was based on bogus information from an inaccurate survey, that I have the availability to come back and request that you rescind your approval because you based information from the board that was totally incorrect. Where now we're hearing that the piles that you approved were at 27 feet. And the council for the condominium is saying, we don't know where the property line, so maybe it was 29 feet. So you were perjured, or the condominium association perjured themselves, bringing you false information. So I want to have the availability after the city commission hears my waiver to question your original approval and request that you rescind, if I don't agree with what happens at city commission, to rescind your approval and review their application.
How does that work?
Thank you.
He said his piece.
Yeah, we can.
I guess there won't be cocktails by the pool for quite a while.
Anybody else, have their hat on and ready to go? Thank you again, everybody. This was not an easy evening. Are you pointing at something?
Yes, I am, but not this part of the town.
I'm defending, all right.
Thank you all. Anybody else? Mr. Flanagan, do you have something?
Good evening.
Huh?
Goodbye.